Jaime Lannister felt the chill of the Iron Throne long before he sat upon it. He had not thought this day would come, nor that he would live to see it. Yet here he was, one hand made of flesh and bone, the other fashioned of gold, standing before the seat of kings as the realm's new ruler in all but ceremony. The great hall of the Red Keep was hushed save for the echo of his boots upon its floor. Sunlight pierced the high windows, illuminating motes of dust that hovered in the stillness. For a moment, he remembered the feeling of waiting outside this chamber with the Kingsguard, clad in white, sworn to serve a king he had once killed with a single sword thrust. Now he was poised to claim the seat for himself, and he could still feel Cersei's ghost lingering. He had lost weight in the final days of the war, the angles of his face more pronounced, the stubble on his jaw now touched with more silver than gold. His hair, once the pride of House Lannister, was shorter and had darkened. He could feel his nerves knotting beneath his skin, a mixture of grief and something he dared not name. Ambition, perhaps, or duty. He thought of all those who might have vied for this seat. Stannis Baratheon was long dead. Joffrey was gone. Tommen was gone. Myrcella was gone. Cersei was gone. And so many more. The Seven Kingdoms had become a graveyard of those who had once laid claim to kingship or to influence. Now only Jaime Lannister remained, not because he had ever hungered for power, but because there was no one else left who could hold the realm together. The lion with a golden hand stood at the threshold of destiny. He ascended the dais. The Iron Throne loomed ahead, a twisted structure of melted swords, each blade once brandished by some foe of Aegon the Conqueror. It was sharper and more intimidating than he remembered. Many who had taken that seat had ended in ruin. The Targaryens, the Baratheons, even his son Joffrey, who had scarcely understood the weight of it when he claimed it. And then Cersei, bold and cunning, a queen who had ruled with an iron will but perhaps too large a thirst for fear and intimidation. She had underestimated the forces outside her door. Her end had been as bloody as her life's work. When she fell, she took with her the illusions of Lannister supremacy. Now the illusions remained shattered, and it fell to Jaime to pick up the pieces. He turned to face the hall. A handful of courtiers, guards, and highborn folk had gathered at the edges of the throne room, uncertain of what was expected of them. These were the survivors of the latest battles, the cunning or merely lucky few who had avoided destruction during the madness that had gripped King's Landing. Some had once served Cersei, others had tried to remain neutral. They were all that was left of the capital's official machinery. Tyrion was absent. The last Jaime had seen of his brother was days ago, riding out of the city with a weary expression. Whether he was off trying to broker alliances or fleeing once and for all, Jaime did not know. A part of him ached with the wish that Tyrion might have stayed, but that was not Tyrion's way. He had lived too long under the shadow of other people's plans. Brienne was here, though. Jaime could sense her presence at his back. No longer a knight of the King's Guard, but something else, commander, guardian, perhaps the closest thing he had to a conscience. She stood tall, in gleaming armor that bore her own sigil, though no one here would contest if she chose to wear the lion's colors instead. Duty had bound them together in ways Jaime still did not entirely understand. Their companionship had outlasted wars, betrayals, shifting loyalties, and the total destruction of House Stark's illusions, yet Sansa Stark held the North. And Jaime suspected that soon he would need to negotiate with her and with all the other heads of great houses. That day was not yet upon him, but it would come. The realm would not heal itself. And so Brienne was here, a sentinel made of flesh and resolve. The voice of a herald broke the silence, faltering, Jaime of House Lannister. Lord Commander of the armies of the Crown, rightful protector of the realm, shall he be proclaimed king. It did not reverberate with the confidence of a coronation. The words fell awkwardly in the still air. Jaime almost laughed at the absurdity. There was no high septon now to bless or anoint him. So many traditions had crumbled along with the city's walls. All that remained was the stark necessity of leadership. The realm needed a king, or at least someone strong enough to keep the hunger and chaos at bay. And so Jaime Lannister found himself stepping forward, that golden hand gleaming in the daylight as it caught a sunbeam. I accept, he said simply. No elaborate speeches, no lavish ceremony. It was the plain, unvarnished truth. If he did not sit the throne, someone else would, and that someone might tear down what remained of King's Landing in a quest for more power. He could not allow that. The words hung in the air, a vow of sorts. He turned and faced the throne. 2 guards in battered Lannister livery came forth. They had cleared away the ashes and debris left behind by the last siege, the last purging flames. The seat was as it always was, sharp edges, cold metal, a seat of cruelty and power. In the stories, it was said the rightful king should never sit comfortably upon it. Jaime had served the Mad King Aerys. He had seen the tyranny that could blossom from fear and madness. He had also seen the cruelty and cunning of his own house. In stepping toward the throne, he was willingly embracing a burden that might destroy him. He lowered himself, felt the points of metal along his back. He tried not to shift too much. The swords bit his armor, pricking through the thick coat beneath. With a subtle exhalation, he realized he was king, yet it felt more like a sentence than a crowning. The hall remained silent until the herald repeated himself, more loudly this time, "Long live King Jaime." From the edges of the space came a half-hearted echo. "Long live King Jaime." There was fear in their voices, uncertainty. King's Landing had been rocked by so many changes, so many kings and queens, that no one truly knew what to feel. There was no joy. There was a heavy tension, a watchfulness. Even Jaime was uncertain whether he could lead them. Yet here he was as the new occupant of a throne that had devoured so many. He gazed down, his eyes finding Brienne's. She gave him the barest nod, her face solemn. Whatever else might come, he would not face it alone. Perhaps that was enough. In the hours that followed, King Jaime's first official act was to call together what remained of the royal council. It was a pitiful gathering. The Master of Coin had perished along with half the city. The Master of Laws had vanished. Grand Maester Roswin was there, wrinkled and trembling, having survived by hiding in a storeroom. A knight too wounded to leave his bed served as Master of Arms in name only. The Lord Commander of the City Watch had deserted his post. This was the fractured inheritance Jaime now held. The Red Keep itself had not been spared from the bloodshed. Smoke still rose from certain courtyards. The stench of death was too thick to ignore, even behind closed doors. Cersei's madness and the ensuing battle had reduced King's Landing to a husk of what it had been. They convened in the small council chamber, a round table where too many seats were empty. Jaime sat where the king would sit, a modest golden lion pinned to his doublet. He had not yet donned the formal regalia of a king. That would come later, if ever. The days of extravagance were over. Those who had gathered were stiff, uncertain. Some remembered Jaime only as a famed knight or as the one who had killed King Aerys. Others knew him as the father of the dead kings Joffrey and Tommen, an awkward truth seldom spoken of openly. Still others simply saw the man who had strangled Cersei's rule in its final moments. Jaime looked around, seeing them all, Grand Maester Roswin with his watery eyes, Sarella the scribe who had once counted coins for the crown, a few lords whose houses had pledged fealty to the Iron Throne but had lost entire retinues in the fires. "We have no gold," said Sarella softly, her hands shaking upon a ledger. The crown's coffers were already empty from the war. "Cersei." Queen Cersei seized what we had left for the last stand. Most was spent on buying Sel's words who turned against us as soon as Daenerys. Jaime lifted his hand. He did not wish to hear more about Daenerys Targaryen's final assault on King's Landing. The memories were too raw. He owed her a debt for slaying the undead threat in the north, and he owed her condemnation for the devastation she had unleashed upon the city. But she, too, was gone, claimed by betrayal in the aftermath of her own victory. The cycle of brutality had been endless. Now the city was left with ruins. "What about House Tyrell's gold?" asked Lord Commander Yoren, who had once served under Cersei's forces. "Perhaps. House Tyrell was wiped out by Cersei's alliance with Euron Greyjoy," said Jaime. "Don't you recall?" He forced himself not to speak Cersei's name with venom. She had been his twin, his love, his downfall. Yet now she was gone, and he was left to salvage the consequences of her reign. Highgarden might still stand, but the Tyrell line is ended. Lady Olenna saw to that in her final moments, though Cersei put the final nail in their coffin. "We cannot look to them for funds." Sarella cleared her throat. "We could impose new taxes upon the city, but there is nothing left to tax. The people have nothing. The city is half burned, half starved. The rebellion that swelled the last time we tried to raise taxes would be a gentle stroll in the gardens compared to what would happen now. We must secure food, or King's Landing will starve outright. Winter is still lingering in the fields, and famine looms." Jaime nodded, feeling the weight upon his shoulders grow heavier. "We need trade routes open. We need ships entering Blackwater Bay. We need the riverlands, the reach, anywhere that can spare grain or coin. The city has endured too many sieges. We must show the people that this reign will be different. He paused, glancing at the meager group around the table, then continued. I want to send envoys to Dorne, to the Vale, even to the north. We will offer peace and the promise of security. We can negotiate new alliances. There must be some houses who would prefer a stable king to another series of wars. Grand Maester Roswyn pushed his spectacles higher on his nose. The North has proclaimed Sansa Stark as queen in the North. She might be reluctant to come to any agreement. They have little love for House Lannister. Jaime did not flinch. I don't doubt that. Still, the North remembers many slights, and we cannot erase the past. But perhaps an apology might be a start. And we can promise them autonomy in exchange for trade. We have no illusions of bringing the North back under the Iron Throne by force. Not after everything that has happened. It was an unusual stance to allow the North autonomy, but if the realm was to survive, concessions would need to be made. Too many had died for the sake of dominion. Jaime saw no reason to spill more blood over an ancient vow of fealty. The Targaryens had forced that vow with dragons, and those dragons were now gone. That era would not return. The group continued discussing logistics. Every problem they raised seemed insurmountable. The City Watch was in disarray. The farmland around King's Landing had been scorched. Euron Greyjoy's ships had raided supply lines. Essos traders were demanding triple coin, and the lords of Westeros were either dead, in hiding, or bitter enemies. By the time the meeting ended, Jaime was left with a looming sense of despair. He did not see how he could possibly rule a city on the brink of collapse, let alone 7 kingdoms. Once the group dispersed, Brienne lingered by the chamber door. Jaime glanced at her. Their eyes met, and something in her expression spoke of empathy, understanding. He gestured for her to follow him out into the corridor. The Red Keep's corridors were gloomier than ever. Servants had fled or been killed, so tapestries hung in tatters and braziers had gone cold. Jaime's footsteps echoed, and behind him, Brienne's heavier boots created a measured cadence. When they reached a small alcove overlooking the courtyard, he turned to face her fully. I have no idea what I'm doing, he admitted. I never wanted this. You know that, don't you? Brienne inclined her head. I know you never sought the throne. You fought to protect the innocent during the siege of King's Landing. You tried to save lives. That is what a king should do. Her words were earnest, and Jaime felt a pang of gratitude. I'm not sure I can manage this. The city is on the brink of starvation. The realm is fractured. Half of them must hate me or fear me. And we have no coin. I suppose I could melt down the Lannister gold from Casterly Rock, but even that may not be enough. It's a start, Brienne said simply. There are always choices. If you do what you can, perhaps the people will see you're not another tyrant. They might rally behind you if you show them mercy, Justice. You ended the Mad King's rule once. Perhaps the gods have placed you here to ensure no more madness prevails. Jaime closed his eyes for a moment. The memory of Aerys's hot blood on his sword was never far from his thoughts. Or perhaps the gods are punishing me, he said softly, by forcing me to rule over the ashes of everything my house once built. Brienne did not respond to that, but her presence alone steadied him. He sighed. We should see to the wounded and the starving. If I can do nothing else, I can see to it that the city is fed, the water purified, and the burned-out homes rebuilt. That might buy us time. Then we must send envoys to the other kingdoms. She nodded. I will help in any way I can. Jaime found himself smiling faintly. For all his sins, somehow he had found one person who believed in him. That belief would have to be enough. The days following Jaime's coronation were a whirlwind of frantic efforts to restore some semblance of order. Under his new authority, the gates of King's Landing were open to traders and travelers, albeit with heavily reduced tariffs, a necessary sacrifice to encourage commerce. The City Watch was restructured with Brienne's assistance. Men who had served faithfully and without cruelty were promoted, while those whose hands were too bloody were dismissed. Some loyalists to Cersei tried to protest, but they found themselves with little support in a city so exhausted by war. A makeshift hospital was set up in the Great September's ruins, or what remained of them, to tend to the wounded. Grand Maester Roswyn oversaw the healing efforts with what scant herbs and poultices he had. Jaime visited these efforts personally, steel in his spine, trying to offer comfort. He was not gifted with words of empathy, but sometimes the sight of a king walking among the wounded was enough to give them hope or at least a distraction from their pain. The biggest challenge was finding food. The countryside around the capital had been pillaged, the farms burnt or left fallow. Jaime sent riders in every direction bearing royal proclamations that any lord or landowner who brought grain, livestock, or produce to the city would be rewarded in silver or in trade agreements. He knew the crown's coffers were low, but if they could reignite the city's markets, perhaps there would be enough trade to pay for these shipments. It was a delicate balancing act, one that might fail at any moment. In the evenings, Jaime found himself in the royal apartments, which were not so grand these days, trying to catch a few hours of sleep. Memories haunted him. The ghost of his sister seemed to fill every corridor, every flickering candle. He recalled her laughter, her icy determination the last time he had looked into her eyes. She had loved no one but her children and him, he told himself. And that had driven her to monstrous deeds. Now, as king, Jaime was responsible for cleaning up those messes. He wondered what Cersei would say if she could see him now, softened around the edges, agonizing over how to feed peasants. She would probably mock him, but perhaps a part of her would be proud that a Lannister still wore the crown. He could almost hear her voice echo in the gloom, "You killed the Mad King, dear brother, so that no more innocents would burn. Would you see them starve under your own rule?" He would not, he decided. No matter how difficult it was, he would find a way. Weeks bled into months. The city remained in a fragile state, but there were signs of slow recovery. A few supply ships from the Reach arrived, though the local lords demanded an exorbitant price. Jaime negotiated as best he could, offering trade concessions and future favors. Euron Greyjoy's reavers still menaced the seas, though with the death of Cersei, Euron's alliance with the crown had collapsed. Now he was a rogue force, preying on anyone and everyone. Jaime had no navy with which to confront him, so the maritime routes remained dangerous. Letters were sent to Winterfell, the Eyrie, Riverrun, Sunspear, and Storm's End, inviting them to send envoys. Most did not reply. Sansa Stark's letter, when it finally arrived, was curt and formal, addressed not to King Jaime but to Jaime Lannister of King's Landing. She acknowledged his desire for peace but would not yield the North's independence lightly. She demanded restitution for the crimes committed against House Stark. She demanded justice for Ned Stark's execution for the harm done to her siblings. Jaime read that letter in silence, feeling the old shame coil in his stomach. He was partially complicit in those crimes, if only by association. His father, Tywin, had orchestrated so much. Joffrey, too. Cersei. All Lannisters, all forging a legacy of tragedy for the Stark family. He penned a response himself. He wrote of the new king's commitment to justice, acknowledging the horrors inflicted upon the Starks, and offered to pay a reparative tribute in gold or trade goods. He admitted that House Lannister had acted ruthlessly in the past and expressed hope that House Stark could find it in their hearts to accept peace for the sake of the realm's stability. He sealed the letter with the Lannister sigil and felt a pang of uncertainty. No matter how genuine his words, Sansa Stark had little reason to trust him. Still, the message was sent. A more promising reply came from Dorne. The new Prince of Dorne, unrelated to the Martells but some distant cousin who had seized control in the chaos, expressed cautious willingness to open trade. Dorne had escaped much of the devastation that ravaged the rest of Westeros, and their harvests remained relatively intact. Jaime seized the opportunity, sending skilled negotiators, what few remained, to broker terms. He offered them a wide berth for cultural autonomy and promised that the crown would not meddle in Dornish politics. In exchange, he begged for shipments of grain, wine, and medical supplies for King's Landing. It was an arrangement that might benefit both parties, but it hinged on whether Dorne believed Jaime's reign would last long enough to honor the deal. The realm was not lacking in whispers that someone else might rise to claim the Iron Throne. Some rumored that a Targaryen heir still lived across the Narrow Sea. Others rumored that Gendry Baratheon might press a claim. Still others whispered that the Vale or the North would proclaim themselves He true power. The land was saturated with mistrust and rumors. Jaime knew that his only chance was to stabilize the city quickly, show the realm that he was not a tyrant, and hope that common sense prevailed. In those same months, Jaime found himself relying more and more upon Brienne's counsel. She had no desire for politics, but she provided a level head whenever Jaime felt the old, impulsive pride threatened to resurface. He had once been known as the best swordsman in the realm, a man who lived for glory and was quick to scorn those he deemed lesser. That Jaime had been tempered by loss, defeat, and humiliation, but the vestiges of that arrogance still lingered. Brienne's presence reminded him of the vows knights swore to protect the weak, to uphold justice. He needed that reminder. They rode together through the city on occasion, wearing unadorned cloaks to conceal their identities or at least to present a less imposing figure. They saw the rubble, the beggars, the half-collapsed buildings. Jaime would sometimes speak with the people, promise them that things were improving. Some spat at his feet or hurled insults, naming him Oathbreaker, Kingslayer, the man who had served cruel masters and fathered even crueler kings. But others, when they looked upon him, saw a Lannister who bore a golden hand and carried himself with a measure of humility that they had not seen in Cersei. One old woman, crouched by the steps of a charred tavern, called out to Jaime, "I remember when your father laid siege to this city, near burned it down. I remember the Targaryens. I've seen the Baratheons come and go. All kings are the same. They take what they want, leave us to starve. Why should I believe you're any different?" Jaime paused, looking down at her. He had no glib answer. He wanted to say he never wanted the throne, that he was doing this only to save the kingdom from further ruin, but words would not suffice. Instead, he reached into his pouch and offered the woman a small purse of coins, telling her to find shelter and food. It was an empty gesture in the grand scheme, but perhaps it would show that, for once, a king might choose to give instead of take. The woman snatched the purse but kept her eyes narrowed. Trust would not come easily. Jaime did not blame her. Those were difficult days, overshadowed by constant challenges. A band of outlaws calling themselves the Queen's Wrath, former loyalists of Cersei, were terrorizing the countryside around the capital, attacking travelers, extorting villages. Jaime dispatched men to deal with them, but the outlaws were elusive. The king's forces were thinly stretched, trying to maintain a semblance of order in a city that had lost half its population to war, famine, or flight. Some nights, Jaime stood on the ramparts of the Red Keep, staring out at the black waters of Blackwater Bay, the salt wind tugging at his cloak. He would think about Tyrion, wonder where his brother had gone. Perhaps Tyrion had fled across the narrow sea or sought refuge in some secret corner of the realm. Jaime missed him. Tyrion had always been the cunning one, the mind behind so many of House Lannister's stratagems. He might have made a good hand of the king, Jaime thought. But Tyrion was not here. So he continued alone, guided by the counsel of Brienne and a few uncertain advisors who had yet to betray him. One evening, as Jaime was retiring to his chambers, Brienne approached with a letter. "It's from Riverrun," she said. "Lord Edmure Tully." Jaime's brow furrowed. "Edmure Tully? I had him as a hostage once. I used him to take Riverrun without bloodshed." Memories of that stratagem flickered, threatening to catapult Edmure's child over the walls if the castle did not yield. That had been his father's method, but Jaime had overseen it. How would Edmure Tully greet Jaime's new crown? Brienne held out the letter, and Jaime took it. The seal showed the leaping trout of House Tully. He broke it open and read. Edmure's script was shaky but clear. The letter spoke of how the Riverlands had been ravaged by countless armies, from the War of the Five Kings to the final struggles against the Night King, and then the Targaryens pushed south. They, too, were weary. They needed peace. Edmure had heard rumors that King Jaime was not following in Cersei's footsteps of cruelty. The Tully Lord proposed a gathering, a single parley at Harrenhal. He invited all the major houses or their envoys to discuss the future of Westeros, including the question of the North, the question of succession, and how to rebuild. Jaime swallowed hard. Harrenhal was a cursed place, the seat of so many misfortunes, but it was also a large and centrally located castle. If the houses agreed to parley there, it might be a chance to show leadership without more bloodshed. Yet there was risk. Jaime had made many enemies, and Harrenhal's vastness provided ample room for treachery. Still, refusing the meeting might signal weakness or fear. He looked up from the letter, meeting Brienne's gaze. "I suppose I have to go," he said. "If I don't, it will be another sign that the crown has no interest in negotiation. We've had enough war." Brienne nodded. "I agree. But you must prepare for danger. I'll see to your guard." Jaime attempted a wry grin. "I'll have the best guard in the realm, Ser Brienne of Tarth." She did not smile back, but her blue eyes flickered with an emotion close to warmth. "I will protect you with my life. For the good of the realm." He touched her gauntlet hand with his golden one, a fleeting gesture of trust. "I know you will." So preparations began for King Jaime's journey to Harrenhal. The old fortress had been left in partial ruin after the wars, but Edmure's letter claimed it was suitable enough to host the lords, or what remained of them. Jaime's advisors were nervous, but he insisted. The realm needed this. He had the battered royal carriage prepared, as well as a retinue of trustworthy knights from both the Crownlands and the Westerlands, men who had proven their loyalty by refusing to partake in Cersei's cruelest acts. The journey took them through regions still scarred by fire and blood. Small folk watched from a distance as the royal procession passed. Jaime kept his banners visible, the crowned lion of House Lannister now, though some might never accept that sigil. He had no illusions that the sight filled people with anything but anxiety. The King's Road was lined with outlaws, deserters, men who saw little difference between a Lannister king and any other tyrant. But Brienne's presence, along with a competent guard, deterred attacks. Along the way, they received word that some houses had agreed to attend the parley: House Tully of Riverrun, House Bracken, House Blackwood, representatives from the Stormlands. But House Stark's attendance was uncertain, as was the Vales and Dorns. The seat of Harrenhal belonged to no one truly stable at the moment, so it became a neutral ground by default. On the 10th day of travel, they saw the ominous silhouette of Harrenhal rising against a gray sky. Its towers were massive, melted in places by the dragon fire of Aegon the Conqueror long ago. Walls soared, thick enough to repel any army. It was said to be cursed, and Jaime believed it, for every house that held it came to ruin. Now it would host a gathering that might decide the fate of the realm. The drawbridge was lowered upon their arrival. Jaime's retinue was met by a small party bearing the banners of House Tully, a red trout leaping on a field of blue and mud-red. Edmure Tully himself stood at the gate, dressed in modest finery, his face lined with worry. Jaime dismounted, feeling the ache in his joints from days on horseback. He approached Edmure with guarded courtesy, offering a polite bow of his head. "Lord Tully," Jaime said, "thank you for organizing this parley." Edmure studied Jaime's face as though trying to reconcile the memory of the Lannister who had besieged Riverrun with the new king before him. "Your Grace," Edmure said stiffly. Then, with a faltering politeness, "Welcome to Harrenhal. May these walls witness the beginning of peace, not more death." Brienne stood at Jaime's side, her posture vigilant. She nodded a greeting to Edmure, which he returned. Jaime could see the tension in Edmure's expression, memories of captivity, of the threat to his family. Jaime had used vile tactics to take Riverrun peacefully, and Edmure had little reason to forget that. Still, here they were, forced to cooperate for the greater good. Inside Harrenhal, torches lined the colossal courtyard. Soldiers and servants bustled about, trying to clear living spaces in the half-ruined towers. Jaime was given apartments in the least damaged wing, though the rooms were drafty, the windows broken. He remembered hearing stories of the scale of Harrenhal, that it dwarfed even the Red Keep. Walking through its vast corridors, he believed it. The fortress was a shell of its former glory, but the immensity remained. That evening, a great hall was set for the initial feast, meager though it was. Long tables were laid with trenchers of tough bread, salted meats, boiled vegetables. This was not King's Landing fare, but it was enough to fill bellies. Jaime took his seat at the highest table, with Edmure Tully on his right. On his left sat the Lady Celia Bracken, who eyed Jaime with open suspicion. Across the table was Lord Blackwood, an elderly man who had lost half his household in the wars. Several lesser lords were scattered down the benches, all eyeing one another warily. Knights and guards mingled at the margins, hands on hilts, expecting treachery. Edmure cleared his throat and stood. "My lords, ladies, and your grace," he began, voice echoing in the gloom of the lofty hall. "We gather here to discuss the future of our realm, which has seen too many wars, too many kings. Let this parley serve as an opportunity to seek common ground and prevent further bloodshed." He sat down, and a cautious silence followed. Jaime stood next, scanning the assembled faces. Some of these lords had fought against him at one point or another. Others had once been his father's allies. All of them were shattered by the prolonged conflicts. "I thank Lord Tully for calling us together," Jaime said. He raised his golden hand slightly, a small gesture. "I will not pretend to be a perfect king. I have been called Kingslayer, Oathbreaker, I have served a tyrant, and I am the brother and lover of another tyrant. But I stand here now, asking for your help in rebuilding the realm. If Westeros is to have a future, we must set aside grudges and prevent further devastation. I pledge to seek peace and fairness. I will do what I can to protect the realm from the chaos that has consumed it." His words hung in the air. Some of the lords exchanged glances. Some seemed unmoved, others uncertain. There was scattered applause, mostly from Jaime's own party. The feast continued with stilted conversation. Jaime tried to speak with Lord Blackwood about the state of his lands, about bandits that roamed the riverlands. Lady Bracken interjected, accusing the Blackwoods of harboring renegades. Old grudges simmered. Jaime listened carefully, trying to see if any alliances could be formed. Edmure mostly observed, offering the occasional remark about the importance of trade routes and stability. Toward the end of the meal, a stir at the far end of the hall drew everyone's attention. The door opened, revealing a tall woman with auburn hair partially hidden beneath a gray cloak. She was accompanied by a small retinue of northern guards. Murmurs spread. Jaime recognized her immediately. Sansa Stark, Queen in the North. She had come after all. All eyes turned to her. Sansa walked with regal poise, her face a composed mask. She wore dark northern garb, no southern finery. Her retinue bore the direwolf sigil of House Stark. The hush in the hall became profound as she approached the high table. Jaime rose from his seat. He felt Brienne shift behind him. Sansa's gaze swept the gathered lords, then landed on Jaime. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture more courtesy than deference. "Your Grace," she said with measured politeness. Her voice had the quiet strength of someone who had seen too much suffering. "I trust this meeting will prove worthwhile." Jaime dipped his head. "Queen Sansa of the North, your presence honors us. Please, be seated." They arranged another seat at the high table. Sansa's guards remained standing, tense. She removed her cloak, and Jaime saw the wolf sigil pinned to her dress. She met Edmure Tully's eyes, nodded a greeting to her mother's uncle. Edmure looked relieved. "My lady," he said, "it gladdens me to see you here." A servant brought food and drink. Sansa sat, her spine straight, like a queen indeed. The tension in the room was palpable, as if all awaited the first clash. But Sansa surprised Jaime by speaking in a level tone. "The North has no desire to wage more war, your Grace. But we will not accept tyranny or subjugation. We are prepared to remain independent, as we declared, but I came here to explore possibilities of trade and mutual prosperity, if that is something the Iron Throne is willing to consider." Jaime nodded slowly, mindful of the eyes on him. "I've said before that I have no wish to drag the North under the Iron Throne by force. Times have changed. If an arrangement can be made where both the Crown and the North benefit, I'm open to discussing it." Sansa's expression remained carefully poised. "Then we shall discuss it in the coming days." Their exchange was polite, almost too polite, yet it was enough to avert immediate hostility. The feast eventually broke up, and the lords dispersed to their chambers. Jaime felt the weight of Sansa's presence as though it were a test. Would he show the arrogance of House Lannister, or would he truly offer something new? The next morning would bring negotiations, demands, and likely arguments that could last for days. As Jaime departed for his assigned chambers, he caught Sansa's eye across the hall. She did not smile, but neither did she glare. Instead, she offered a slight nod, as though acknowledging that they shared a burden. Then she vanished into the corridor, accompanied by her ever-watchful guards. The first formal gathering occurred in the morning light, in a grand but partially ruined chamber that once served as Harrenhal's banquet hall. The tapestries were torn, letting in beams of dusty sunlight. A semicircle of chairs was arranged around a long table. Jaime took his seat at one end, with Brienne behind him. Sansa sat opposite him, flanked by northern lords. Lord Royce of the Vale had joined her, apparently representing that region as well. Edmure Tully and a handful of river lords sat to one side, while the Stormland representatives, Lady Bracken and Lord Blackwood, completed the circle. They spent the better part of the morning outlining grievances. Lord Blackwood accused House Bracken of border raids. Lady Bracken demanded recompense for farmland lost. Sansa spoke of men from the Crownlands encroaching on the neck. Edmure called for a reconstruction fund for the Riverlands, citing the devastation inflicted by both Lannisters and Targaryens. Jaime listened, took notes, and offered to arrange a central treasury for reconstruction if certain conditions were met, an uneasy compromise that might or might not please them. When the issue of the North's independence arose, tension spiked. Some lords insisted the North should remain part of the Seven Kingdoms, worried that if they permitted one region to secede, others might follow. But Jaime stood by what he had written to Sansa. Forcing the North to kneel through warfare would only plunge the realm into further ruin. So he proposed a formal alliance, a treaty of mutual defense. The North would remain independent, but in times of external threat, the Crown and the North would come to each other's aid. They could also establish free trade between them. In return, the North would allow safe passage for southern merchants, ensuring that the trade routes would open between White Harbor and the rest of the realm. Sansa's eyes narrowed as she considered it. "And what of the crimes committed against my family?" she asked quietly, her voice resonating with the memory of betrayal. "What of the murders of my father, my mother, and my brother? Will the Crown acknowledge its part in that?" Jaime felt every gaze shift to him. He remembered the day Ned Stark lost his head, how he had been away from King's Landing at the time. Joffrey had called for that execution, spurred on by others. He remembered Catelyn Stark, how she had died at the Red Wedding, orchestrated by Walder Frey and Tywin Lannister. Robb Stark, too. So many horrors. He rose slowly. "I acknowledge them," he said, voice low. "I cannot bring the dead back to life, but I can speak the truth. My father was the architect of the Red Wedding, Walder Frey his accomplice. My son, King Joffrey, executed your father against my brother Tyrion's counsel and my sister's manipulations. For these crimes, House Lannister has earned your enmity. If there were a way to atone, I would offer it." A hush fell. Sansa did not blink. "Words are wind, your grace." Jaime inclined his head. "Yes, they are. So I propose more than words, a tribute to the North, delivered in gold, provisions, and labor to help rebuild any region you see fit. And an official royal decree condemning the acts committed against House Stark, acknowledging that House Lannister was complicit. I will personally sign it. If that is not enough, name what would be and I will try." Sansa's lips pressed together. Her gaze flicked to Brienne, who stood silently, her posture rigid. Something passed between them, memories of how Brienne had once served Lady Catelyn Stark, perhaps. Sansa folded her hands. "I will consider this offer," she said softly. That was the best they could do for now. Negotiations continued, hour after hour, voices rising and falling, old resentments churning. Lunch was a hurried affair, cold meats and stale bread. Tempers frayed. Lord Blackwood threatened to leave if Bracken would not budge. Lady Bracken threatened the same in reverse. Edmure Tully pleaded for unity. Sansa remained poised but unyielding, occasionally conferring with Lord Royce. Jaime spoke little, mostly letting the lords hash out their disputes. He interjected only to offer compromises or clarifications on what the Crown could realistically provide. In the late afternoon, they were interrupted by the arrival of fresh riders, representatives from Dorne, bearing the Sun Anspear banner. Their leader was a stern, dark-haired man named Anders Euler, who claimed to speak for the new Prince of Dorne. Jaime welcomed them, relieved that at least Dorne had seen fit to join the parley. If the Vale was represented, and now Dorne as well, then they were only missing some of the Storm landlords and the Westerlands themselves. He found it ironic that no one from Casterly Rock had come to support him. House Lannister's hold on their ancestral seat was tenuous at best, with so many branches of the family dead or scattered. By nightfall, the first day's talks concluded with no definitive treaties, only the promise that they would reconvene on the morrow. The lords drifted to their chambers in various states of exhaustion. The weight of the realm's wounds pressed on all of them. Jaime found himself lingering in the dark corridors of Harrenhal, the torchlight casting flickering shadows on the melted stone. This was a place haunted by the ghosts of the past. Harren the Black, roasted alive in his own tower by Aegon's dragonfire, the Targaryens who had used this castle as a prize or punishment for various houses, the northern armies who had once camped here under Robb Stark, the atrocities committed by Ser Gregor Clegane under the Lannister banner. So much blood had been spilled. Now, was it possible they might forge a lasting peace here? He came upon Sansa Stark standing by a narrow window, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard. She was alone, her guards a few paces away, far enough to give her some privacy. Jaime hesitated, then approached slowly, mindful that she might not welcome his company. She turned to him, her expression reserved, her auburn hair catching the torchlight. "Your Grace," she greeted him, her tone neither warm nor hostile. "Queen Sansa," he replied, halting a couple steps from her. The corridor was chilly, draft seeping through the cracks in the stone. For a moment they simply stood in silence. Finally, Jaime ventured, "I am glad you came. Many in your position would have refused." Sansa's mouth curved in a faint, sad smile. "I came because the North cannot endure another war. We have lost so many, fought the undead, fought the Lannisters, watched as the Targaryen queen turned on King's Landing. We need stability, but that does not mean we will be fooled by empty gestures. He nodded, unsurprised. Nor should you be. I know the name Lannister is reviled in the north. The only thing I can do is prove through action that I am not my sister, nor my father, nor the boy King Joffrey. Sansa's eyes flicked over his golden hand. Perhaps you cannot, but I do believe that people can change. I have changed. I was once a girl who believed in songs and knights in shining armor, but reality stripped my illusions. I suspect you have lost illusions of your own. He exhaled slowly, thinking of that naive, arrogant young Jaime, who had once dreamed of living up to tales of chivalry while betting his own sister and despising anyone he deemed lesser. You're not wrong, he said quietly. A distant clang of metal echoed in the halls. Sansa's gaze returned to the courtyard. Do you truly mean to let the North remain independent? Yes, Jaime replied. I do. Forcing the North to kneel would only lead to yet another rebellion in a year or two. Better to have an ally, even if they wear a different crown. She studied his face, searching for any hint of duplicity. The lords in there might fight you on that. Some, yes. But if we can reach an agreement that benefits them, trade routes, farmland, a unified front if the Iron Islands attack or if foreign powers threaten, then perhaps they will relent. They are weary of war, more than they thirst for conquest. Sansa nodded. Then you have my ear, Jaime Lannister. But you must also deal with the North's demands for justice, and that means more than just gold. We want the truth acknowledged. We want the names of those who planned the Red Wedding. We want formal condemnation of Walder Frey's house. You want closure, Jaime said, understanding. We can put that in writing. We can also arrange for the Frylands to pass to other lords, or revert to Tully oversight. The Freys are all but extinct now anyway. Arya Stark took care of that, or so the rumors say. A flicker of pride passed over Sansa's face at the mention of her sister, quickly masked by composure. There will never be true justice for what happened to my family, but perhaps we can find a measure of peace. They stood in silence for a moment, the night pressing close. Jaime felt a strange surge of respect for Sansa. She was still young, but she carried herself like someone who had endured a lifetime of trials, in a way that mirrored his own transformation, though from a far different perspective. He did not delude himself into thinking that one conversation could erase the wounds between Stark and Lannister. But it was a start. Eventually, Sansa stepped back. It's late. We should rest. Tomorrow will be another trying day. Jaime inclined his head. Good night, Queen Sansa. She nodded and moved past him, her guards forming around her like a protective shell. Jaime watched her go, then turned to make his own way to his chamber. He felt oddly hopeful, as if a brittle bud of possibility had taken root in these cursed halls. The second day of talks proved as grueling as the first, but small compromises began to emerge. Lord Blackwood and Lady Bracken reached a tentative accord on their border disputes after Jaime offered crown adjudication that would allow for impartial witnesses. Edmure Tully and Anders Euler from Dorne found some common ground in establishing trade routes via the Sea of Dorne, with shipments traveling upriver into the Riverlands. Sansa Stark pushed for formal independence of the North, and though some lords balked, Jaime reiterated that the crown would respect their sovereignty if they entered a mutual defense pact. Beneath all these negotiations ran an undercurrent of tension, but also of reluctant hope. None of the parties wanted another war. Each recognized that forging new alliances was the only path forward if Westeros was ever to recover. By the evening, a preliminary document had been drafted, a set of accords tentatively known as the Pact of Harrenhal. It outlined the terms for trade, mutual defense, and the recognition of northern independence. It also designated a reparations system to help the areas most devastated by the war, funded partially by the crown and partially by pledged contributions from wealthier lords such as the Vale and Dorne. Jaime presided over this with no small amount of anxiety. He knew that if any lord decided the terms were too unfavorable, the entire pact could unravel. But for now, it seemed they were moving toward acceptance. In the quiet hush of Harrenhal's main hall, Each representative approached the table to sign, or to place their sigil seal upon the parchment. The old maester present had quills and wax ready. Sansa Stark went first. She signed with a graceful flourish, writing Sansa of House Stark, Queen in the North. Then Lord Royce affixed the seal of the Vale next to hers. Edmure Tully signed, Lady Bracken, Lord Blackwood, Anders Euler for Dorne, a Stormland knight who had arrived the previous day for House Fell. Finally, Jaime stepped forward. He paused, gazing at the parchment. So many wars, so many lives lost, and here was this fragile piece of paper claiming to end the cycle. He picked up the quill in his left hand, mindful that his right was gold. The nib scratched on the parchment as he wrote, Jaime of House Lannister, King of the Undulls, the Royner, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. He hesitated, crossing out 7. Then he continued, Lord of the 6 Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm. He placed his signature, then heated the red wax over a candle. He pressed the Lannister seal, a golden lion, into the wax, leaving his mark. A hush fell as the signatories regarded one another. It was a symbolic moment, one that might or might not hold in the face of ambition and old hatred. But for now it was done. That evening they shared a far less formal gathering in Harrenhal's courtyard with music and simpler food. Jaime saw some of the lords relaxing, exchanging cautious pleasantries. Sansa spoke with Edmure Tully about the memory of her mother. Anders Euler joked quietly with a Stormland knight about the dryness of Dornish wine. Even Lady Bracken and Lord Blackwood stood near each other, though they exchanged frosty looks. Jaime wandered to the battlements, weary from the constant performance of kingship. He leaned against the cold stone, gazing down at the flickering torches below. Brienne joined him after a few moments, her footsteps heavy on the ancient steps. It seems we have peace, Jaime said quietly, though he was afraid to call it that too soon. Brienne nodded, gazing out over the courtyard. For now. The question is whether it will last. We'll do our best to see that it does, Jaime replied. He glanced at her, a faint, tired smile curving his lips. I never thought I'd see the day when I broker peace for a realm I once helped tear apart. She looked at him with a softness in her blue eyes. Yet here you are. He reached out, resting his golden hand gently against her forearm, a wordless acknowledgement of the journey they had taken. She did not pull away. For a moment, amid the battered towers of Harrenhal, they stood as allies, perhaps more than allies, though neither spoke it aloud. Before dawn the next day, Jaime was awakened by the sounding of horns. Groggy, he rose from his makeshift bed, hearing shouting in the corridors. He pulled on a tunic and boots, buckled on his sword. In the courtyard, he found lords and guards rushing about. The horns blared again, signaling the approach of riders or danger. Jaime hastened to the gates, Brienne on his heels. Outside Harrenhal's walls, a force of mounted knights and soldiers had arrived, their banners snapping in the wind. Jaime recognized those banners immediately, the Golden Lion of House Lannister, quartered with the inverted colors for House Lannister's lesser branches. But these were not his men. They had come from the Westerlands, from Casterly Rock, perhaps. At their head was a tall knight with a crimson cloak, his helm shaped like a lion's head. Jaime felt a chill. The knights parted, revealing a man in gold-trimmed armor. When he removed his helm, Jaime saw the face of his cousin Daven Lannister, a proud expression twisting his mouth. Daven's voice carried, I come to Harrenhal to speak with the pretender who calls himself king in my father's seat. The gathered lords exchanged uneasy glances. Jaime strode forward. Cousin, he said, forcing civility. You've come a long way. Daven sneered. I come to challenge your claim, Jaime. House Lannister belongs to the rightful heir of Casterly Rock. And I will not see our house shamed by your surrender of the North, nor your squandering of what remains of our power. You are not fit to wear the crown. A hush fell. Sansa emerged from the gates with her guards, scanning the new arrivals warily. Jaime's retinue stepped to his side, hands on sword hilts. Daven's men bristled, but the tension did not yet boil over into violence. Jaime tried to remain calm. The realm does not need more fighting, Daven. Did you come here to wage war? Daven's lip curled. I came for your crown, cousin. Relinquish it, or by the laws of gods and men, I will take it from you in trial by combat. Let the gods decide which Lannister has the right to rule. Shock rippled through the courtyard. Sansa exchanged a worried look with Brienne. Jaime felt his heart pound. A trial by combat for the throne itself. The realm could be plunged into yet another conflict if the houses were forced to pick sides. He exhaled and reached for the calmer instincts he had honed of late. I have no desire to kill you, Daven, he said quietly. We are kin. And the realm is fragile. Let us discuss this. There may be a way. Spare me your half-measures, Daven snapped, drawing his sword, the steel catching the morning light. If you will not yield, meet me in single combat. else I'll declare you a coward and a usurper, and the Westerlands will rise to dethrone you. The North is watching. The Riverlands, the Vale, Dorne, will they follow a king who cannot even hold his own seat? Silence. Jaime looked around. He saw the uncertain expressions of the lords. If he refused, Daven would claim he was unfit to rule and a civil war might erupt. If he accepted, he might have to kill his own cousin or be killed himself, leaving the realm adrift once more. Brienne stepped forward, voice firm. If you want a trial by combat, you will face me instead. I am the king's champion. Jaime needs not fight his own battles. Daven sneered. Hiding behind a woman, cousin? Jaime's gold hand curled into a fist. He had regained some measure of skill in his left hand, but he was not the swordsman he once was. Daven was young, strong, and hungry for power. This would not be an easy fight for Jaime. Yet if he refused to fight personally, would that not undermine his authority in the eyes of the realm? He stepped forward, laying a hand on Brienne's arm to stop her. No, he said quietly. This challenge is made to me. I will answer it. She turned, her eyes filled with worry. Jaime. He offered her a ghost of a smile. All my life I've been called Kingslayer. Perhaps I must fight now to defend a kingship I never sought, to spare the realm more bloodshed. If I die, perhaps the realm will still have this fragile peace. If I live, it means the gods have granted me the right to see it through. It must be me, Brienne. A hush fell. She clenched her jaw but nodded, stepping back. Jaime faced Daven. We will meet on Harrenhal's grounds at midday. Prepare yourself. Daven nodded curtly, sheathing his sword. So be it. The gods will decide. He turned and strode off with his men to set up their camp. Jaime remained in the courtyard, his heart pounding. This was not how he had imagined the day beginning. The realm stood on the cusp of a fragile unity, and now his own cousin threatened to unravel it with a single challenge. Brienne grabbed his shoulder. Jaime, your left hand. I know, he said grimly. I'm not the swordsman I was, but I've learned other ways to fight. Sansa approached, her expression tense. Your grace, if you lose, what becomes of the Pact of Harrenhal? Jaime met her gaze. It will still stand if the lords who signed it choose to uphold it. My cousin can claim the crown, but he cannot force the North to kneel. Nor can he undo the agreements we've made unless the lords consent. But losing might mean renewed war. Daven will want to reassert Lannister power over everything. She exhaled. Then you must win. Jaime forced a half-smile. I suppose I must. I'll need to brush up on my footwork in the next few hours. Pardon me. He turned and walked toward the castle's interior, Brienne at his side, his mind already whirling with the weight of the coming duel. The sun rose higher, illuminating Harrenhal's melted towers, where the future of Westeros would again hang on the edge of a sword. Midday arrived too quickly. Word spread, and a crowd gathered in Harrenhal's expansive courtyard. Lords, knights, and soldiers formed a ring around a cleared space where two men would fight for the throne. Some looked grim, others eager for blood. Daven Lannister stood at one end, clad in resplendent armor polished to a mirror sheen, a lion's head helm under his arm. He wore a smirk of confidence. Jaime stood at the opposite end, clad in simpler plate. His golden hand was uncovered, catching the sun's glare. He flexed his left hand, gripping the hilt of the sword that Brienne had helped him select. It was well-balanced, slightly lighter than the great swords he had once wielded. He had spent the last hours sparring with Brienne, reminding himself of defensive stances, practicing quick strikes. But training in a courtyard was nothing compared to a fight to the death. And Daven was strong, cunning, and full of ambition. Grand Maester Roswyn stood to the side, ready to bear witness, muttering prayers to the Seven. Sansa observed from a raised platform with other lords. Brienne hovered near Jaime, her expression carved with concern. He had refused her again when she offered to fight in his stead. He had to do this himself, win or lose. The Maester raised a hand. We stand before the gods old and new to witness a trial by combat. Daven Lannister challenges Jaime Lannister's claim to the throne. Let the gods show favor to the just. Daven slid his helm over his head and raised his sword, an elegant longsword inlaid with gold. Jaime took a breath, lifting his blade in his left hand. He regretted not having more time to prepare. Once he had been the greatest swordsman in the realm. Now he was uncertain if his skill could match an armored knight in his prime. But there was no turning back. The Maester dropped his hand. Begin. Daven advanced first, circling Jaime. His movements were smooth, confident. Jaime stepped lightly, focusing on footwork. Daven tested him with a quick thrust. Jaime turned it aside with a parry, nearly overextending. Daven struck again, and Jaime deflected, feeling the jolt in his wrist. The crowd murmured. They circled again, testing each other. Daven then lunged in earnest, unleashing a series of fast cuts aimed at Jaime's left flank. Jaime blocked, his muscles remembering the old rhythms, though his golden hand offered no help. Daven hammered his defenses, pushing Jaime back. Jaime's foot nearly caught on a loose stone, but he righted himself, twisted, and slashed at Daven's shoulder. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Daven laughed behind his visor. "You're slower than the songs say, cousin." Jaime did not respond. He concentrated on defending, waiting for an opening. Daven pressed forward, a flurry of blows that forced Jaime to retreat step by step. The watchers seemed to sense Jaime was on the defensive. A few called out encouragement or insults. Sansa stood silent, her face pale. Brienne's hands were tight around the railing, her knuckles white. Daven feinted high, then swung low. Jaime saw it a moment too late. The blade carved into Jaime's right thigh, where his armor was jointed. Pain erupted. Jaime grunted, staggering. Blood seeped from the cut. Daven pressed the advantage, bringing his sword down in a brutal overhead blow. Jaime raised his own blade to block, the impact reverberating up his arm. His wounded leg almost buckled, but he managed to hold. Daven drew back, confident he had the upper hand. He circled with a predatory stance. Jaime's breath came ragged. He felt the hot trickle of blood down his leg. He had to end this quickly. Feigning weakness, Jaime let his sword droop slightly. Daven charged, smelling victory. At the last instant, Jaime pivoted on his good leg, swinging his golden hand in a brutal punch to Daven's helm. The metal fist crashed into the lion's head visor, denting it inward. Daven staggered, dazed. Jaime followed with a savage slash aimed at Daven's midsection. Metal screeched, and Daven cried out, stumbling back. His armor was cut open at the side, and blood stained the gold inlay. The crowd roared. Daven ripped off his helm, blood streaming from a gash at his temple. Fury distorted his features. He lunged wildly at Jaime, who sidestepped as best he could, wincing from his leg wound. They exchanged a series of fierce blows, sparks flying. Jaime felt his stamina fading, but Daven was wounded too, his breathing ragged. A final exchange, Daven aimed a thrust at Jaime's chest. Jaime deflected it, twisting the blade away, and hammered his golden hand into Daven's face again. The blow sent him reeling. In that split second, Jaime brought his sword around in a reverse slash, biting through the gap in Daven's gorget. Blood sprayed. Daven collapsed, dropping his sword, choking. Jaime stood above him, blade poised. Daven's eyes, wide with pain, stared up at Jaime. With a trembling hand, Daven tried to reach for Jaime's leg, but he couldn't. Jaime's chest heaved. A hush fell over the courtyard. The kill stroke was obvious, drive the blade through Daven's throat, end him. But Jaime hesitated. He stared at his cousin, who had challenged him for the throne, who would have killed him. Did he have to end another Lannister life? From the crowd, someone shouted, "Finish it." Jaime took a breath. He remembered the vow he had once broken, the vow he had once taken. He remembered seeing the Mad King's cruelty and deciding that the realm deserved better. Now he was the realm's king, with all eyes upon him. With a surge of will, he lowered his sword. "Yield," Jaime said hoarsely, blood pouring from his thigh. "Yield, Daven. I will spare your life." Daven choked, blood bubbling on his lips. His pride warred with his pain. Finally he croaked, "I yield." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jaime let the sword drop from his hand, staggering as pain flared in his leg. Brienne rushed forward to support him. He nodded, pressing a hand to the wound. The maester pushed through the throng, kneeling beside Daven to staunch the flow of blood at his neck. Jaime turned to face the onlookers, swaying. "Let it be known that I am king, and I have chosen mercy," he said, voice ragged. "Let Daven's life be a sign that we need not shed more blood." He collapsed to one knee as pain overwhelmed him. Brienne caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. The last thing Jaime saw before his vision blurred was Sansa's face, pale and resolute, and the glint of his golden hand smeared with red. Jaime drifted in and out of consciousness for what felt like days. He dreamt of Cersei, of their children, of King Aerys screaming, "Burn them all." He dreamt of Brienne, her eyes full of concern, and of Tyrion raising a goblet in toast somewhere far away. When he finally came to, he was in a chamber with stone walls, the faint light of dusk filtering through a narrow window. His leg was heavily bandaged, throbbing with a dull ache. Grand Maester Roswyn was at his bedside, mixing something in a mortar. Brienne stood near the foot of the bed, arms crossed. When Jaime stirred, she stepped forward, relief flooding her expression. "You're awake," she said softly. Jaime tried to speak, his throat dry. Roswyn offered him a cup of water, which he drank greedily. "How long?" he rasped. 3 days, Brienne answered. "You lost a lot of blood. The maester thought you might not wake." Jaime swallowed, nodding slowly. The memories of the duel came back in a rush. "Daven?" He lives, Brienne said. His neck wound was severe, but the maester saved him. He's under guard, recovering in another chamber. He'll need time to heal. Jaime leaned his head back against the thin pillow. Relief mingled with weariness. He was not proud of nearly killing his cousin, but the realm might interpret his mercy as strength or weakness. Perhaps both. The lords? Jaime asked. Brienne's lips quirked. They remain. Many left for their own lands, but they signed the Pact of Harrenhal. The Stormland lords have recognized your kingship, as have those in the Riverlands and Dorne. The Vale and the North remain independent in their own rights, with treaties of friendship. Sansa left yesterday, but she gave you her regards. She said that she hopes you heal swiftly, your grace. Jaime exhaled, closing his eyes. A fragile peace, sealed by signatures and by the spectacle of a bloody duel. And Daven's men. Most have bent the knee, Brienne said. Some left in disgust, but they didn't dare provoke a fight. Casterly Rock remains in question, but for now no one else steps forward to challenge you. He opened his eyes, meeting hers. Then it's done. We have a realm, however fragile. How long until I can travel? The maester cleared his throat. A few more days at least, before you should ride. The wound is deep. You risk reopening it if you push too hard. Jaime accepted that with a grim nod. The throne still awaited him in King's Landing, where the rebuilding efforts continued. He had survived another test, but the responsibilities weighed heavier than ever. Brienne placed a gentle hand on his left arm, careful not to jostle him. You did well, Jaime. You kept the realm from another war. He looked at her, noting the exhaustion in her face. Not alone. Thank you for standing by me. She nodded, and he saw something close to a smile. Always. A fortnight later, King Jaime Lannister returned to King's Landing. Word of his victory in single combat spread faster than he could ride, though the story was embellished in the telling. Some claimed Daven had wielded a Valyrian steel sword, others said Jaime had cut him down in one swift stroke. The truth was more complicated, and the scar on Jaime's leg would forever remind him of the price he paid. King's Landing itself looked marginally improved since he left. More traders had arrived, bringing building materials, food, and coin. The City Watch had restored a measure of order, aided by Brienne's vigilance. Refugees trickled back, hoping to find some remnant of home. It was a long way from flourishing, but the seeds of recovery were planted. Jaime resumed his seat on the Iron Throne with the knowledge that 6 kingdoms now recognized his authority, though with varying degrees of enthusiasm, and that the North stood apart. He ratified the Pact of Harrenhal officially, drafting royal decrees that recognized northern independence, established trade agreements, and outlined the reconstruction of ravaged areas. Edmure Tully joined him in court to advocate for the Riverlands, while Anders Euler corresponded from Dorne. The Vale and Stormlands sent occasional envoys. The Westerlands needed sorting out. Jaime would have to make peace with the other Lannister branches, ensure stability at Casterly Rock. For now, that could wait until his cousin Daven recovered. Each morning, Jaime held audiences in the throne room, listening to petitions from commoners and nobles alike, complaints about taxes, accusations of banditry, pleas for justice. He took each matter seriously, doing his best to balance fairness and the realm's needs. It was a tedious process, far removed from the glamour of knighthood. Some days he wondered if he was any good at it, if perhaps Tyrion would be better. But Tyrion was nowhere to be found. So Jaime persevered. He strove to create a new Kingsguard, filling its ranks with knights of proven honor and skill. Brienne was named Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, an unprecedented appointment, but one met with respect from many who had seen her valor. The small council was likewise rebuilt with capable individuals rather than sycophants. Even the Master of Whispers was a woman from the city's underbelly, recommended by Varys's old network. Jaime decided to risk trusting her, for he had no illusions about the importance of intelligence in ruling a fragile realm. One early evening, after a day of petitions and judgments, Jaime retreated to the gardens of the Red Keep, an area still singed by the last battle but showing signs of renewal. Fresh green shoots pushed through the scorched earth. The air smelled of hope, or perhaps it was only his imagination. He walked with a slight limp, leaning on a cane. His golden hand glinted as he brushed aside a few withered leaves. Brienne stood at his side, helmet under her arm. She wore the white cloak of the Kingsguard now, tailored to her tall frame. "Did you ever imagine we would be here?" Jaime asked quietly, gazing at the small flowers that dared to bloom. She shook her head. "No, not after we saw what war could do. Not after all the betrayals and the horrors." He studied her face in the soft twilight, seeing in her a steadfastness that had guided him out of his darkest places. The realm is still wounded, but maybe, given time, it can heal. She nodded. We can try. Jaime reached out, touching a budding flower with his flesh hand, feeling the delicate petals. He thought of all that had been lost: Cersei, his children, the illusions of grandeur that once guided him. And he thought of all that might be gained: a realm at peace, alliances forged in necessity, a king who had once been a kingslayer but now sought redemption in service to the common good. He turned to Brienne and allowed himself a quiet smile. Come, Lord Commander, he said. Let's see how we can help it grow. They walked on together, side by side, as dusk settled over the Red Keep. And though the future remained uncertain, for the first time in a long while, Jaime Lannister believed that the realm might, at last, find its way out of the shadows and into the light. In the months and years to come, the history books would record that Jaime Lannister, once reviled as the Kingslayer, became King Jaime I, the reluctant king, who oversaw the slow healing of a realm torn by war. They would write of the Pact of Harrenhal, the moment when great houses set aside ancient grudges to prevent another slaughter. They would write of the North's independence, the forging of trade routes, the restoration of farmland. Some would say Jaime ruled with a tempered hand, offering mercy where others would have chosen fear. Others would criticize him for allowing the North to secede, claiming it weakened the crown's authority. The truth lay somewhere in between. That in a land devastated by dragons and undead, by tyrants and child kings, it took a man haunted by his own crimes to understand the price of cruelty. In time, under Jaime's reign, King's Landing rose again from its ashes. A smaller city, perhaps more humble but safer for the common folk. The lords of Westeros, weary of endless bloodshed, reluctantly cooperated in the rebuilding. Dorne, the Vale, the Stormlands, the Westerlands, the Reach, what remained of it, and the Riverlands found new bonds through trade and marriages. The North thrived under Queen Sansa Stark, forging a peaceful, if distant, relationship with the Six Kingdoms. The Iron Islands were another matter, occasionally raiding, testing the crown's naval defenses, but found little success against a realm that now stood more unified than it had in decades. And Jaime Lannister grew older, the once golden hair streaked with silver, walking with a cane at times, still bearing the golden hand that reminded him daily of his sins and his redemption. He ruled not as a conquering lion but as a wary guardian, mindful of the fragility of power. He kept Brienne of Tarth as his closest confidant, a sentinel of unyielding loyalty and a woman who embodied the chivalric ideals he had once mocked. Together, they labored to hold the peace as the years stretched on. And though whispers of ambition and rebellion never fully died, they never ignited into a new conflagration. In the annals of Westeros, that would be remembered as Jaime's greatest legacy, not the glorious triumph of conquest, but the quiet forging of stability out of ruins. In the end, that was how the realm came to know Jaime Lannister, a king with a tarnished past and a battered conscience, who rose above his failings to shield the realm from another spiral of destruction. And so the question of what might have been had he never taken the throne faded into history. For in that reality, Jaime Lannister was king, and the Seven Kingdoms, or rather six, survived. And perhaps in that survival there was a hint of the redemption he had sought all his life. Jaime Lannister's dreams were plagued again by old ghosts. In the darkness of his bedchamber he saw flickers of flames dancing along the Red Keep's corridors, the ghosts of voices crying out for mercy and the echo of a mad king's final scream. When he woke before dawn, coated in a sheen of sweat, he felt in his bones that the price of peace would always be vigilance. He could not allow the realm he was trying to rebuild to collapse into chaos. He had won a measure of calm, but calm was not the same as safety. Something in him suspected that troubles still brewed beyond the horizon. Brienne stirred on the chair by the window. She'd appointed herself as his watcher through the night. She'd been reading a musty volume of chivalric tales, surprisingly intact after all the city's turmoil, though she dozed with the book resting on her knees. As he sat up, she opened her eyes, adjusting to the pre-dawn gloom, her hand instinctively drifting toward the pommel of the sword at her hip. "It's only me," Jaime said gently, ignoring the dull ache in his thigh, an everlasting souvenir from the duel with Daven. "You needn't draw steel." Brienne relaxed, brushing a strand of fair hair back behind her ear. The white cloak of the Kingsguard she wore now had a simple dignity that mirrored her own nature. "You were thrashing in your sleep. I thought you might be in pain again." He exhaled. No more than usual. Only the nightmares. She nodded, her gaze steady but compassionate. It's still dark out. You can rest if you like. I'll stay alert. He swung his legs to the side of the bed, gingerly testing his injured limb. No, I won't find peace in sleep tonight. Rising with a soft groan, he reached for the cane he sometimes used in the mornings. Come on, Sir Brienne, walk with me. Let's see how the Red Keep fares in the quiet hours. She rose, following him into the corridor. The lamps were dimmed, the air still. Jaime limped more than usual at this hour, but he refused to let that stop him from taking in the hush of the castle. Silent halls often revealed the mood of the household in ways that noisy days did not. Guards nodded as the king and the Lord Commander passed. The pair paused at intervals to gaze through narrow windows at the sleeping city. King's Landing had begun a cautious revival. The scars of the fires still marred entire districts, but new wooden structures were going up, and merchants' lanterns bobbed near the waterfront. Folk needed the reassurance that life went on. In the courtyard, sparring dummies awaited the next day's training, halberds still lined up in neat rows. Jaime thought about the new generation of recruits who had joined the city watch, many young men and women with illusions of honor and heroism. He hoped they would hold fast to those illusions long enough for the city to benefit from them. He knew well how easy it was to lose one's idealism when faced with war. He glanced at Brienne, noticing the faintest dark circles beneath her eyes. You don't have to keep vigil all the time, he told her. You need rest too. She shrugged, looking somewhat sheepish. I like the quiet hours, less noise to cloud things. He understood her meaning. By day, the palace hummed with endless tasks, negotiations, and the swirl of courtiers. By night, it was easier to think. He reached out with his golden hand and brushed her armored elbow, a subtle gesture of gratitude. He did not speak of it because words felt too small for all he owed her. They continued along the ramparts, looking out over the city. A faint glow was starting to lighten the eastern sky. Seagulls drifted over Blackwater Bay, their cries forlorn. From somewhere in the lower wards of the city, a dog barked. Light from a lone ship flickered upon the waves of the bay, perhaps a fishing vessel returning with its night's catch. In the distance, the sprawl of King's Landing was visible, some rooftops still blackened, but others patched up with fresh timber or tarps. The realm was no longer on the brink of open war, but it was far from healed. Hunger, banditry, plague, these threats loomed even if no bannered host marched under them. As the first gleam of sunrise touched the horizon, Jaime inhaled the cool air. We'll do our rounds and then convene the council, he said. Have you heard any more news of Davin's recovery? Brienne's expression darkened slightly. He's healing well, the maesters say. He's been moved to better chambers, though under guard. They claim he's grown quieter. Jaime let out a long breath. He remembered the fury in Davin's eyes during the duel. That had been a man certain of his own righteous destiny to seize the throne for House Lannister. Jaime had chosen mercy rather than kill him. Perhaps Davin now confronted the reality that he was spared by the cousin he'd tried to slay. Still, Jaime would have to keep a close watch. Ambition did not always die with a single defeat. Let him recover, Jaime said at last. We'll speak when he's well enough. Perhaps he'll find reason or at least a place for himself in this new order. Brienne nodded, though she did not look hopeful. Very well. They continued their slow progress along the walls until the sun had fully risen, casting the city in gold and orange. When Jaime could delay no longer, they turned back inside. The business of ruling would begin soon. A small group of petitioners was already waiting in the throne room when Jaime arrived. The hall felt cavernous, the morning light streaming through the high windows. Guards stood to either side of the iron throne, their eyes forward. The massive structure of melted swords rose behind Jaime, forbidding as ever. Each step up the dais reminded him of the day he had placed himself in this seat with no coronation and no illusions. He settled onto the throne, setting his cane aside. Brienne stood at his right, vigilant. On his left was a royal herald ready to announce each petitioner. Maester Roswin, a bit shaky from age, hovered with a ledger in hand, prepared to record the cases. A few more courtiers trickled in. The herald gave a nod, clearing his throat to call the first matter of the day. Your Grace, a stout man in patched finery began, bowing low. Lord Theomir of House Byrne seeks restitution for property seized during the sack of King's Landing under Queen Cersei's orders. He claims his father's townhouse was confiscated by the Crown's guards and never returned. Jaime gestured for the man to approach. Tell me what happened. Lord Theomir stepped forward, brow lined with frustration. It was near the Dragonpit district, Your Grace. My father was away when Cersei's men came. They forced out our servants and used the house as a watchpost. After the final siege, we found it half-burned, our valuables gone. We have no wealth left to rebuild it. Jaime listened carefully. Was there any record of compensation from the old regime? The man shook his head. None, Your Grace. I humbly request the Crown's assistance in rebuilding, as your decree said you'd consider claims of war losses. Jaime nodded, mindful that many families had lost far more. The Crown is not overrun with coin, he said, voice calm. But we have begun a fund modest, but something for those unjustly dispossessed. You will be assessed by the Master of Coin, and if the Council deems your claim valid, you'll receive materials or partial funds to restore your dwelling. That is the best I can offer. Lord Theomir bowed his head, relief evident. Thank you, Your Grace. The next petitioner was a weary woman wearing the sigil of a minor house from the Stormlands. She told of bandits harassing the roads, seizing grain meant for the capital. Jaime promised to dispatch a contingent of the City Watch, coordinated with the Stormlands local guard, to clear the outlaws. It was the same refrain he heard day after day: bandits, hunger, suspicion, collapsed roads. He gave what judgments he could, trying to strike a balance between punishing wrongdoing and offering relief. By the time the line of petitioners had dwindled, the morning was nearly gone. After a brief respite and a quick meal, bread, cheese, small beer, Jaime made his way to the small council chamber for a midday session. The round table still had empty chairs that once belonged to titled courtiers. Some offices were vacant or filled by caretakers. But a few faces were familiar now. Edmure Tully, who'd agreed to serve as Master of Laws temporarily, wanted to ensure the Riverlands' voice was heard. A clever woman named Cedra, who'd stepped up as Master of Coin. Though she had more experience as a shipping factor than a courtly minister, Brienne attended in her capacity as Lord Commander. Grand Maester Roswin was here, as was a quiet man called Tomard who oversaw intelligence in the capital. What was left of Varys's old network, a tangle D-web that still occasionally produced valuable whispers. Jaime settled into the seat reserved for the king, letting out a small sigh at the ache in his leg. He cast his gaze around the table, noticing how anxious some faces were. We won't be here all day, he promised. But let's see where we stand. Cedra, how fares the treasury? Cedra's mouth turned down. We have hardly any coin left after paying the laborers repairing the city's walls. Levies from the Westerlands have been delayed, Your Grace. The lords there are uncertain of your claim, especially after the challenge from Jaime Lannister. Now they wonder if they need to pay taxes to you or wait for a new overlord. Jaime grimaced. When I'm well enough to travel, I'll ride to Casterly Rock and deal with them directly. Until then, send word that their obligations remain. If they've questions about my authority, I'll answer them in person. Cedra nodded. I will. But we'll need a loan soon, either from the Iron Bank of Bravos or from wealthier lords like the Hightowers. Grain shipments remain expensive. Jaime sighed, recalling how dire the city's supplies were. Approach the Iron Bank carefully. They'll see our desperation and demand steep interest. Perhaps Dorne or the Vale might extend credit on better terms. We have alliances there now. Write to both. Offer them trade privileges in the Crownlands if they'll help finance our rebuilding. As Cedra took notes, Edmure Tully leaned forward. In the Riverlands, we're coping better with each passing month, but brigands still roam. Even with the bandit hunting efforts, we can't fully quell them until the small folk feel safe returning to their farms. A stable monarchy helps that, but we need more boots on the ground. Jaime nodded. I'll organize a new directive for the City Watch, maybe a few hundred men to rotate through the Riverlands. We'll coordinate with local lords. But we're already stretched thin. Edmure gave him a rueful smile. I know. Every corner of the realm is battered. Brienne's calm voice cut in. What of Euron Greyjoy's raiders along the coast? Reports say they're harrying trade ships in the Narrow Sea. Jaime's jaw set. Euron had once allied with Cersei, then turned pirate again when the alliance no longer benefited him. Now he was more an irritant than a full-blown threat, but still dangerous. Our navy is almost non-existent. We can't chase him down at sea. We'll need to station archers and catapults along the coastline and hire sail sails to guard shipping routes. That's expensive, though. Cedra? She pursed her lips. Yes, expensive. But it might still cost less than losing half our trade to piracy. Perhaps there's a way to recruit from the Stepstones or some of the free cities. They have their own vendettas against the Ironborn. We could form a partnership. Jaime looked at Tomard, the intelligence man who sat quietly. Any rumors of Euron seeking allies? Tomard shook his head. He has fewer allies than ever. Most Ironborn tire of his arrogance. But he's cunning. He might strike a quick blow, seize treasure, vanish. Or he might attempt to raid the coasts of the Reach. Word is the new lords there are still reeling from the old wars. If you want to keep him from unifying the Iron Islands under his rule, we should move fast. A strong show of force might deter them. Jaime drummed his fingers on the table, his golden hand resting heavily on the arm of the chair. We'll do what we can, he said at last. But one crisis at a time. For now, ensure ships from Dorne or Essos have armed escorts. Let's not let Euron strangle our supply lines. They moved on to lesser matters. Adjusting taxes, scheduling a future audience with ambassadors from Braavos, investigating allegations of corruption in the City Watch. By the time the council adjourned, Jaime felt drained. Governing was a slow bleed of 1,000 small cuts, each day wearing on him. But he had chosen this path. No, he corrected himself, this path had been forced on him by circumstance, and he had refused to abandon it. When they were done, he rose with Brienne's help. The corridor outside the council chamber was bustling with servants setting fresh torches in the sconces and courtiers whispering about the city's newest gossip, that a Targaryen pretender had surfaced in the free cities, or that the queen in the north had forced a marriage alliance with the Vale, or that Jaime Lannister was forming a secret alliance with House Dane. The usual swirl of rumor. Jaime walked on, ignoring most of it. He was too exhausted for courtly nonsense. He took an afternoon hour to rest his leg, then decided to look in on Daven. The man was convalescing in a secure part of the Red Keep once used as guest apartments for visiting lords. A half-dozen of the Kingsguard's men guarded the corridor, ensuring Daven could not stir up new trouble. Jaime dismissed all but one, then knocked on the heavy door. Brienne stood at his side. A muffled voice answered. Jaime pushed the door open. Daven stood by the window, leaning on a chair, a bandage around his neck. His left arm was in a sling from the slash that had bitten into his shoulder. He turned at the sight of Jaime, his eyes haunted and resentful. "Your Grace," he said with forced civility, though the words seemed to taste bitter on his tongue. Jaime regarded him, recalling how close the duel had been. Daven's face was thinner, cheeks hollowed by pain. "Cousin," Jaime said softly, "how do you fare?" Daven let out a harsh laugh. "Alive, if that's your question. Not that I can muster much gratitude for the man who nearly killed me." Jaime kept his voice level. "I spared your life. Yes, to gloat? Or so you can parade your mercy around as if it redeems you." Daven's tone was acidic. Brienne stiffened at Daven's insolence. Jaime lifted a hand, signaling her not to intervene. "I understand your anger," Jaime said, "but you challenged me." "I defended myself, and I gave you a chance to yield." Daven grimaced, running a hand through his disheveled hair. For a moment, he looked unsure. "I fought for House Lannister, for the line of Tywin. The house my father served so faithfully, the house we both come from. Now you let half the kingdom slip away, kneeling to the demands of traitors. You dishonor our name." "It was never about the family name alone," Jaime replied. "It was about saving what's left of Westeros from another war. We could have forced the North to kneel, but at what cost? More burning cities, more butchered smallfolk? I won't repeat the mistakes of our father. Or my sister." Daven glared at him. "You've grown weak. I've grown wise enough to value peace over pride. That's what father never learned." Jaime's golden hand tightened on his cane. "You're free to have your own opinions, Daven. But you will not conspire against me again." Daven's eyes flickered with something that might have been shame or maybe resentment. "You think I can, in this state? I can hardly lift a sword. Perhaps one day I'll be well again." A pause hung in the air. "What then? Am I to be a prisoner forever?" Jaime glanced at Brienne, then back at Daven. "You'll remain under watch until I decide otherwise. In time, if you show no further aggression, I might let you return to Casterly Rock or wherever you wish. But understand, the throne is mine. If you try to raise arms again, I won't give you a second chance." Daven looked at the floor, some storm of emotions flickering across his face. At length he said, "I was proud once. Thought I would restore House Lannister's glory. Look at me now. A half-crippled fool at your mercy. There was a hint of defeated self-loathing in his voice. Do what you will. I can't stop you. Jaime watched him for a long moment. The man had lost the aura of arrogance he'd once carried. If you can learn to let go of blind pride, there might be a place for you at this court, Jaime finally said. We still need Lannister hands to help rebuild the Westerlands. I don't want you as an enemy, Daven. I'd rather see House Lannister united in forging a better future. Daven did not reply, only turned toward the window. Jaime recognized that the conversation had ended. He motioned for Brienne to follow him back out. In the corridor, she studied him with quiet curiosity. You believe he'll come around? Jaime shrugged. He might. Or he might wallow in hate. But at least I offered him a choice. He let out a tired breath. I have no interest in erasing what remains of House Lannister. I just want an end to the bloodshed. If he can't accept that, I'll do what I must. Brienne gave a small nod of agreement. Your mercy is a risk. But it shows him something different from how Tywin would have ruled. That's the hope. Jaime tightened his hand on the cane. Come, let's see if the day holds any more surprises. Over the following weeks, King's Landing settled into a cautious rhythm. Work crews rebuilt collapsed sections of the city walls, the market swelled with fresh produce from the Riverlands and some shipments from the Reach, refugees trickled back. Jaime continued to hold court, hearing petitions and settling disputes. Brienne oversaw the training of a reformed Kingsguard along with the city watch. Edmure Tully departed eventually to return to Riverrun, leaving an appointed deputy behind to handle crown legal matters. Tomard, the quiet master of intelligence, sent out letters to gather information on Euron's movements, the rumored Targaryen pretender, and any rising threats from across the Narrow Sea. As for the north, occasional messages arrived from Queen Sansa Stark in Winterfell, typically terse updates on the success of trade caravans or the quelling of minor banditry in the Neck. There was no warmth to her words, but no hostility either, only a polite professionalism. Jaime took that as a better sign than he dared hope. The North had enough to keep it busy without meddling in Southern politics. The independence arrangement seemed to be holding, at least for the moment. One day, Cedra informed Jaime that a delegation from the Vale would soon arrive, led by Lord Yohn Royce. They intended to discuss deepening trade ties with the Crown. Hearing the news, Jaime decided it might be wise to host them with some pomp to show that King's Landing still had some measure of regal standing. When the delegation arrived, Jaime greeted them in the throne room with a modest but respectable ceremony, a small line of guards in polished armor, banners of the Crown's lion, and the presence of several members of the small council. Lord Royce was a broad-shouldered man, silver-haired, wearing heavy bronze armor etched with runes. He bowed to Jaime with stiff courtesy. Alongside him came a younger man wearing the crescent and falcon sigil of House Arryn, presumably a cousin or retainer. Your Grace, Lord Royce said, his voice echoing in the vaulted hall. The Vale recognizes your efforts to keep the realm stable. We are here to finalize an agreement for continued trade and mutual defense. Although we remain loyal to Queen Sansa's alliance, we see no harm in forging stronger bonds with King's Landing as well. Jaime descended from the throne carefully, leaning on the cane only slightly to shake Royce's hand. You honor us with your presence, Lord Royce. Our city is open to you. We'll speak of trade, security, and anything else that might benefit the Vale and the Crown. They arranged a banquet that evening in a smaller banquet hall, one that had escaped the worst of the sieges. Musicians played a gentle backdrop of strings and a modest spread of food was laid out: roast fowl, fish from the bay, fresh breads, and fruit tarts. The delegation from the Vale mingled with Jaime's courtiers, though the atmosphere was somewhat stiff. Lord Royce and his men cast watchful eyes around as though expecting treachery. Jaime approached Royce at the end of a long table where a cask of ale had been set out. Two servants poured the dark liquid into clay cups. Brienne stood a short distance behind Jaime, always vigilant. I trust the Vale fared better than most during the wars, Jaime said, accepting a cup of ale. I hear your harvest was good this year. Royce nodded. Aye, we were fortunate. The Ares high fields remain intact and the Vale's valleys were spared most of the fighting once the Boltons were driven from the north. We count our blessings. Jaime sipped his ale. It was bitter but fortifying. You mentioned security concerns. Are the mountain clans causing trouble again? A bit, but we have them mostly contained, Royce allowed. The real issue is that some brigands fleeing the Riverlands cross into our borders. We can handle them, but it's an ongoing nuisance. Jaime exhaled. I've deployed men to aid Edmure in clearing out the Riverlands. Hopefully that will reduce the influx. Good, Royce said. He glanced at Brienne, seeming to measure her. Sir Brienne, your reputation precedes you. I have men who still talk about your victory over the Hound, though they say the fight was fierce. Brienne's cheeks colored slightly. That was a lifetime ago, my lord. And not something I take pride in. Royce chuckled. A formidable foe, the Hound. That you survived is testament to your skill. We need more true knights these days. She offered him a small bow. I serve his grace and the realm. They fell into a discussion of formalities, with Royce outlining the Vale's desire for guaranteed safe passage across Crownland roads in exchange for discounted grain shipments and occasional cavalry support if the crown required it. Jaime found the terms reasonable. Better a moderate alliance than renewed isolation. By the time the feast ended, they drafted the bones of an agreement that would be formalized in the days to come. Lord Royce departed soon after, leaving behind a few of his men to finalize details. The next dawn, Jaime escorted the delegation to the city gates. Royce parted with a respectful bow and a handshake, promising to carry the news of King's Landing's cooperation back to Queen Sansa in Winterfell. Jaime watched their retinue depart along the dusty road, dust motes dancing in the morning sun. When he turned away, Tomard was there, wearing his discreet, somber attire. He inclined his head. Your Grace, if you have a moment? Jaime signaled for him to speak. Tomard drew a folded parchment from his sleeve. A raven arrived from Sunspear. Word is that Prince Corran, well, they style him Prince, though he's of a distant offshoot of House Martell, has been consolidating power. He requests a formal audience, or at least a letter, confirming your intentions regarding trade. He also suggests there may be a threat stirring across the narrow sea, rumors of a new Khalasar. We're not certain yet if that concerns Westeros, but these Dothraki hordes sometimes turn their eyes west when they sense weakness. Jaime recalled Daenerys Targaryen's stories of leading Dothraki across the sea, something once thought impossible. He frowned, glancing at Brienne. A new Khalasar. Could be rumor, or they might truly be massing. If they do, we'll have no dragons to counter them this time. Brienne's mouth set in a grim line. We're already overextended. Another invasion, Tomard nodded. Just a whisper of caution, Your Grace. Dorne seems concerned enough to mention it. Jaime turned the parchment over in his hands, mind racing. Send a reply to Dorne, thanking them for the warning. Assure them we're interested in continuing trade. As for the Dothraki, we'll keep watch. At least we're not locked in internal war for the moment. He paused, eyeing Tomard. Anything else? Tomard hesitated. A minor matter, perhaps. There have been increasing rumors about a Targaryen claimant in Essos. Some say a child of Rhaegar, others claim a more distant branch. Possibly just spurious talk. Jaime remembered how so many had pinned their hopes on Daenerys Targaryen only to see her become a force of devastation in King's Landing. The city still bore the scorch marks of dragonfire, the skeletons buried beneath the rubble. We can't rule out the possibility, Jaime murmured. Keep your ears open. If some Targaryen banner were to appear, it might attract all manner of discontents. Tomard dipped his head. I will, Your Grace, he said, then departed with measured steps. Brienne glanced at Jaime, concern in her gaze. The world never stops turning, does it? Even with the realm at peace, trouble lurks everywhere. Jaime forced a half-smile. We knew that when we chose this path, didn't we? She nodded solemnly, and they returned inside. It was later that same day, during a lull, that a quiet knock on Jaime's private solar door drew him from a moment's respite. When he called for them to enter, a guardsman stepped in, bowing low. Beg pardon, Your Grace. There's a dwarf at the gate, demanding to see you. Claims he's your brother. Jaime shot upright from his chair, heart-thudding. Tyrion? He half-limped, half-rushed to the guard. Where's he? Let him in at once. The guard blinked, startled at the king's sudden urgency. Yes, Your Grace. Right away. Jaime glanced at Brienne, who had been reading a report near the window. She set the parchment aside, understanding that something significant was happening. They followed the guard out of the solar and through the corridors toward the courtyard. It was there, under the bright midday sun, that Jaime saw a familiar short figure with mismatched eyes and a face lined by years of worry and wit. Tyrion Lannister, disheveled from travel, cloak dusty, carrying a small satchel. Two guards stood near him, uncertain if they should bow or keep him at sword's length. Jaime hobbled forward, ignoring the throbbing in his thigh. He caught Tyrion's shoulders in his hands, one flesh, one gold, and looked him over. Gods, you're still alive. Tyrion smiled, his mouth quirking in that sardonic twist Jaime remembered so well. Likewise, brother. The rumor reached me you'd been stabbed, burned, and crowned. I see at least one of those is true. Jaime let out a breath of relief he hadn't known he was holding. By the seven, I thought you might have fled across the narrow sea forever. Tyrion shrugged, stepping back. I did flee for a time, but Essos lost its charm. And I heard you'd somehow taken the throne after Cersei. I had to see it with my own eyes. His gaze flicked to Brienne. Sir Brienne, I see you remain steadfast at my brother's side. She inclined her head. I do. Jaime reached out and clapped Tyrion's shoulder again. Come inside. Get cleaned up. You must have so many stories. And I need your counsel now more than ever. Tyrion looked both grateful and guarded, scanning the Red Keep's walls. I'm not exactly the most welcome man in King's Landing, considering, well, everything. Are you sure you want me here? You're my brother, Jaime answered simply. And this city is under my rule now. If anyone objects, they can take it up with me. A shadow flickered across Tyrion's expression. Perhaps he remembered the trial for Joffrey's murder, the day he stood accused by nearly every soul in King's Landing. But he did not voice his memories. Instead, he nodded. Lead on, King Jaime. I suppose I'll see how the city looks after all the drama with dragons and queens. They set Tyrion up in a small but comfortable suite of chambers, and Jaime sent a servant to fetch a basin of hot water, fresh clothes, and a decent meal. Once Tyrion was bathed and changed, he found Jaime waiting in a nearby solar with Brienne and a flagon of wine. Tyrion's eyes lit up at the sight of the wine, though he poured his first cup with a surprise. Restraint. Shall we skip the pleasantries? Tyrion asked, sipping gingerly. I heard how Cersei fell, about the final siege, about Daenerys turning the city to ash only to be betrayed in her moment of victory. The realm nearly fell apart after that, didn't it? Jaime nodded. It did. And I never wanted to be king, but there was no one else left who could hold things together. It's been a struggle every day. Tyrion eyed his brother. You look older. Not just the silver in your hair, there's a weight in your eyes. Jaime smiled ruefully. I am older, in spirit if nothing else. Responsibility for an entire realm does that. He gestured with his golden hand. I can't simply abandon it, Tyrion. Not while there's even a faint chance of building something better. Tyrion took a longer swallow of wine. I assumed as much. Now, your men told me a story of how you fought Jaime Lannister in single combat, nearly died, then spared him. Sounds like the kind of reckless gallantry that's either foolish or brilliant, I can't decide. That depends on the day, Jaime said. But now Daemon's locked up, simmering in his own bitterness. The realm is mostly at peace, though we're drowning in debt, the city is half-ruined, and there's talk of threats from overseas. He eyed his brother. I could use a hand of the king, someone with a mind sharper than mine. Someone who can match wits with the bankers, the lords, and the devils across the sea. Tyrion paused, the cup halfway to his lips. A flicker of longing and caution warred in his features. Me as your hand? The city once hated me. Some still do. It's not as though they adore me, Jaime said dryly. We've both got tarnished reputations. But we also have skills the realm needs. Tyrion's mouth pressed into a line. I once served as hand to Joffrey. It did not end well. But if you truly wish it and you believe I can help, I will. Or I can disappear back to Pentos if that's preferable. Jaime shook his head firmly. No. Stay. Help me untangle this mess. I trust you like no other. And if the city raises a cry against you, let me handle it. Tyrion exhaled, setting the cup down. Very well, brother. I accept on one condition. Name it. Let me handle the Iron Bank negotiations. I have a knack for dealing with men who think themselves the most cunning in the room. Tyrion's eyes gleamed. I might also do something about these rumors of a Targaryen pretender. If there's any truth to them, we need to know now before Westeros is caught off guard again. Jaime managed a small, grateful grin. Agreed. Welcome back to King's Landing, Hand of the King. Tyrion lifted his wine in a mock toast. 7 help me, I must be mad. Brienne, who had been standing near the window, cleared her throat. I'll let the council know, your grace. She exited, leaving the brothers to talk. Tyrion probed Jaime for details of the last few years, all the subtle alliances, the day-to-day chaos of rebuilding. Jaime found a strange relief in unburdening himself to someone whose counsel he trusted implicitly. Tyrion responded with occasional barbed humor, but also with the quicksilver intelligence that had served him well in the past. Late that evening, they parted ways, each returning to their quarters. Jaime's mind whirled with renewed hope. Tyrion's presence could lighten the load if the city accepted him. If the realm gave him a chance. Jaime tried not to dwell too long on all that might go wrong. The next morning, Jaime convened the small council with Tyrion at his side. Reactions were mixed. Cedra looked uncertain, Grand Maester Roswyn coughed uncomfortably, Tomard studied Tyrion with unreadable eyes. Yet none could deny that Tyrion Lannister's cunning was legendary. When Jaime formally named Tyrion as his hand, no one dared voice opposition outright, though Jaime sensed some uneasy undercurrents. After the meeting, Tyrion chatted privately with Cedra about the treasury, leaving Jaime to handle the day's petitions. Word spread quickly throughout King's Landing. The imp was now the king's hand. Some grumbled that the Lannisters were again hoarding power. Others recalled Tyrion's past half-favorable decisions when he was acting hand years before, particularly the defense against Stannis. More than one merchant whispered that Tyrion had once slashed tariffs and introduced policies that, while not always popular with the nobles, helped the city's lower classes. In the taverns, rumors mixed with half-truths. But no one openly revolted. The city had endured far worse than a dwarf with a clever tongue. In the weeks that followed, a new routine emerged. Tyrion threw himself into the treasury ledgers, pored over trade agreements, and penned letters to bravos. He cajoled and threatened in equal measure, spinning a web of bargains that left Jaime slightly breathless. Brienne noted that Tyrion seldom drank to excess these days. He seemed focused, as though he had found a purpose again. One day, a shipment of food arrived from Dorne, greater than expected, negotiated at a lower cost. Cedra quietly admitted Tyrion had orchestrated that. Another day, news came that Euron Greyjoy's raiders had pulled back from certain shipping lanes, spooked by rumors that King's Landing was paying Lyseni pirates to hunt them. Jaime confronted Tyrion, who only smiled cryptically. Let's just say the Iron Fleet can't be everywhere at once. Jaime realized, with a cautious optimism, that Tyrion was precisely the cunning ally he needed. Yet tensions persisted. Some nobles balked at giving the imp so much influence. Tyrion handled them with well-timed jests and stinging wit. More troublingly, rumors circulated that Daemon Lannister's supporters in the Westerlands had begun to test the crown's reach, withholding taxes or ignoring decrees. Jaime prepared to journey west as he had promised, but his legs still pained him enough to make the trip daunting. Tyrion suggested they wait until the realm's finances were stronger, so they could travel with a suitably large retinue to impress upon the Westerlands that Jaime's rule was secure. In the midst of these concerns, a raven arrived from Winterfell. It bore the Stark seal, and inside was a concise message from Sansa Stark. The North has discovered several ex-Queen's men traveling north, stirring unrest in our smaller villages. They claim allegiance to a true Lannister king, though they are vague. If you have any knowledge of these men, or if they speak for Daemon, you may wish to recall them. We will not tolerate subversion in the North. Jaime read it aloud to Tyrion. The hand's eyes narrowed. So some of Daemon's loyalists have slipped away north, perhaps thinking to incite trouble or recruit allies to their cause. Jaime tapped the parchment with his golden hand, frustration building. I hoped imprisoning Daemon would quell such nonsense, but apparently not. I need to reassure Sansa that this is not my doing. Tyrion nodded. Yes, do that at once. Also, instruct her to deal with them as she sees fit. If they're agitators, we can't ask her to show them leniency. He paused. If they truly support Daemon, they may try to recruit a northern faction. That's unlikely to work, given the North's old grudges against the Lannisters. Jaime sighed. I'll write her, but each new problem underscores that if I don't make a statement in the Westerlands soon, these loyalists will keep cropping up like weeds. Then we find a way, Tyrion said. As soon as you're able, gather a strong escort and ride west. Let the Westerlands see you standing tall. Metaphorically, if not literally. He gestured at Jaime's cane with a wry half-smile. If they resist, well, we can remind them that your mercy is not infinite. Jaime nodded. Agreed. Let's aim for a royal progress once the roads are safer. Maybe in a month or two. In the meantime, I'll pen a letter to Queen Sansa, disclaiming any knowledge of these men's actions and giving her leave to handle them. He wrote that letter immediately, sealing it with the crown's sigil, feeling a pang of regret that the realm's rifts still ran so deep. Another day, another challenge. As summer's heat crept over King's Landing, Jaime prepared the caravan for his journey west. Tyrion insisted on a sufficiently grand retinue to awe any doubters. Brienne selected knights she trusted for security. Jaime forced himself to train daily, building stamina in his injured leg. It never stopped hurting, but at least he could ride without fear of collapsing. Meanwhile, Tyrion arranged for a parallel journey by sea of trade goods meant as gifts for the Westerland lords, part carrot, part show of strength. One humid morning, the royal procession assembled in the Red Keep's courtyard. Horses stamped, wagons creaked under the weight of supplies and gifts. Banner-bearers held high the crowned lion's sigil. Tyrion perched on a smaller courser, adjusting his reins and squinting at the sun. Brienne wore gleaming white plate, the Kingsguard cloak sweeping behind her. Other knights in gold-trimmed armor lined up, forming ranks. Jaime, for his part, sat astride a dappled mare, his sword belt fastened tight, the golden hand resting lightly on his thigh. The crowd that had gathered to watch included curious commoners and anxious courtiers. They whispered among themselves, uncertain whether to cheer or keep silent. Jaime raised his voice, addressing the onlookers. "I go west to secure the realm's unity, to meet with the lords of the Westerlands who have served House Lannister for generations. We seek peace and prosperity, not subjugation. The crown rides for all of you so that we may rebuild together." A scattering of cheers rose, mingled with cautious applause. It was enough. Jaime dipped his head in acknowledgement, then gave the signal. The procession moved out, hoofs clattering over cobblestones. Once past the city gate, they turned onto the Gold Road, beginning the long trek toward Casterly Rock. Those first days of travel were slow but uneventful. Peasants in the Crownlands watched them pass, some waving uncertainly, others kneeling or bowing. Fields of barley and oats stretched into the distance, many still in the process of regrowth after the ravages of war. Occasionally, they passed a smoldering ruin of a farmhouse, reminding them that brigands had not vanished entirely. Yet no ambushes occurred. By night, the caravan made camp in meadows or disused holdfasts. Tents were erected, watch rotations assigned. Tyrion often spent the evenings by the fire with a small group of knights and guards, swapping tales or playing a game of Cyvasse with a battered set he'd brought. Jaime sometimes joined them, but more often he patrolled the perimeter with Brienne or reviewed the next day's route with the caravan master. Sleep came in fitful stretches, accompanied by the murmur of insects in the tall grass and the distant hoot of owls. On the sixth day, they reached an inn near a crossroads where the roads from the Reach and the Stormlands converged with the Gold Road. The inn's sign showed a faded lion, though it was scratched and dirty. Locals peered out from behind shuttered windows as the caravan passed. Jaime halted to inquire if they had lodging for the night. The innkeeper, a timid man with sweat-stained clothes, stammered that they had only a few decent rooms, the rest being under repair. Tyrion smirked, remarking that he'd grown used to sleeping under the stars anyway. While the men set up camp in the inn's yard, Jaime, Brienne, and Tyrion ducked inside for a meal at a rickety table by the hearth. Flies buzzed in the stuffy air. A pot of stew simmered, filling the room with the scent of onions and mystery meat. They were served ale in chipped mugs. Tyrion wrinkled his nose but drank it anyway. Midway through their meal, a group of half-drunk laborers wandered in. They eyed the travelers suspiciously at first. But once they recognized the king, his golden hand was difficult to miss, their faces lit with either curiosity or alarm. One of them, a middle-aged man with a streak of gray in his beard, approached cautiously. "Begging you pardon, your grace," he slurred, half-bowing. "Never thought I'd see the king himself in this dusty old place. We heard rumors you're a Lannister. You from Casterly Rock?" "I am," Jaime said evenly, lowering his spoon. "What of it?" The man wiped a sweaty palm on his tunic. "Just that we used to get caravans from the Rock back when Tywin Lannister was alive. Now it's all rumor. Some say the Lannisters are done for, that you can't pay your debts no more." A hush fell around the table. Tyrion's brows arched. Brienne tensed, hand drifting near her sword. Jaime forced a small, calm smile. "We'll pay our debts," he said, the old words tasting slightly bitter. "And we'll see the Westerlands prosperous again. These are harsh times, but House Lannister endures." The man bobbed his head, then raised his mug in a shaky toast. "Then maybe there's hope after all." He stumbled back to his companions, who murmured in low voices. Tyrion watched them with mild amusement. "We do have a reputation, don't we?" "Yes," Jaime said quietly. "But it's not what it once was." They finished their meal. Jaime left a small pouch of coins with the innkeeper, enough to pay for the entire caravan's presence and then some. He wanted to make a statement that the crown was not here to squeeze small folk. The innkeeper's eyes shone with gratitude, though he still seemed wary. The caravan continued west the next morning, the roads winding through gently rolling hills. As they advanced, the farmland grew more organized, the roads better kept. The presence of Lannister banners in hamlets increased. Jaime noticed that some folk wore worn lion crests on their cloaks or had lion motifs on their houses, remnants of Tywin's once mighty rule. On the ninth day, they encountered their first sign of trouble, a burned carriage off the side of the road, still smoking. Bodies lay strewn around it, traitors by the look of it. Jaime and Brienne dismounted, scanning the scene with grim faces. Tyrion remained astride his horse, cursing softly under his breath. Whoever had attacked these travelers had done so recently and savagely. Knights spread out searching the area. One found fresh tracks leading north into a wooded ravine. Could be bandits, the knight reported to Jaime. Or deserters from the war, or men loyal to some renegade house. Hard to say. Brienne knelt to examine one of the fallen traitors, her expression stoic but troubled. We should see if any survivors fled. They found none. Jaime felt a knot of anger in his chest. This was his realm, yet bloodshed persisted. He turned to Tyrion. We can't leave this unpunished. We have enough knights to send a detachment in pursuit. Tyrion nodded. Agreed. I'll stay with the main group. Take as many men as you need. Jaime was about to answer when Brienne spoke. Your Grace, let me lead the detachment. You shouldn't risk your leg on rough terrain. If there's a fight, you could be endangered. Jaime hesitated. She had a point. His pride chafed at the idea of staying behind while Brienne faced unknown enemies. But logic demanded he heed her counsel. Very well. Take a dozen knights. If you find them, bring justice. Brienne pressed a hand to her heart in salute. I will. But be wary, Your Grace. This could be a trap to draw you out. He gave her a firm nod. Go. We'll wait for your return at the next village. She and the knights rode north, following the tracks. Jaime and Tyrion continued west with the rest of the caravan. A subdued mood settling over them. Tyrion muttered something about how the realm was too large to be secured by a single king, how the Targaryens had used dragons to enforce order. Jaime kept silent, not wanting to conjure those old nightmares again. By late afternoon, they reached a fair-sized village with a small wooden palisade. The local reeve opened the gates, bowing nervously to the king's party. Jaime asked for lodging, explaining they'd wait for some of their men to return. The reeve offered space in the village's meager hall. That evening, by candlelight, Tyrion shuffled through correspondences, while Jaime stared at a crude map of the Westerlands. The wind howled outside, a reminder that the ocean lay not too far to the west, though they still had some distance before reaching Lannisport. The next day, just after midday, Brienne and the knights returned. They rode in with a grim air, several carrying blood-smeared weapons. One knight nursed a shallow arrow wound. Brienne's expression was set in stone. Jaime moved to intercept her in the yard, ignoring the twinge in his thigh. She dismounted. We caught them, she said simply, voice taut. A group of about 15 men. They claimed to be loyal to Daemon Lannister, said they were raising coin and supplies for the true king. They had no shame about killing travelers for it. Jaime's brow furrowed. Did they surrender? Brienne nodded. After we killed half of them. The rest are in our custody, tied and guarded. We lost one knight, and 2 more were injured. A flicker of sorrow crossed her face. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Jaime swallowed, feeling a surge of anger that these men had murdered innocents in his cousin's name. We'll question them, then see them executed. Tyrion? Tyrion stood nearby, arms folded. Agreed. We can't show leniency for banditry, especially when they claim it's on behalf of House Lannister. Within the hour, they dragged the prisoners before Jaime. Filthy, scowling men with broken armor and bloodied clothes. They eyed the king with mixture of defiance and fear. One spat at Jaime's feet. You're no king of mine, he snarled. You let the north slip away, you butchered Queen Cersei's men. Daemon is the rightful heir. Jaime did not waste words. You've robbed, murdered, and invoked House Lannister to justify it. You are enemies of the crown. You stand condemned. Another prisoner, a younger man whose courage seemed to fail, pleaded, We were desperate, Your Grace. There's no coin left in the Westerlands. We thought to follow Daemon. He promised us a better life. Please, have mercy. Jaime felt a flicker of pity that quickly soured in the face of the carnage these men had wrought. My mercy does not extend to wanton killers of innocents. You made your choice. They were executed by hanging that afternoon, the entire caravan and village watching. Jaime stood stoically by, cane in hand, expression grim as the men dropped from the makeshift gallows one by one. He had known war and killing before, but this felt different, like a cold necessity to keep the realm from falling back into chaos. When it was done, the watchers dispersed in uneasy silence. Jaime, exhausted, retreated to the village hall where he sank onto a rough wooden bench. Tyrion sat beside him, swirling a cup of ale. Hard decisions. But I think you made the right one. Jaime stared at the floor. Maybe. The realm is tired of blood. But if we let them go, more would die. They threatened everything we're trying to rebuild. Brienne, standing nearby, her sword sheathed, nodded. Your men are grateful you acted decisively, Your Grace. They see you defending small folk, not ignoring their plight. Jaime looked at her. I hope so. But it's not enough. If they're emboldened by Daven's name, others might be too. We must reach Casterly Rock soon. 2 more days of travel brought them finally to the outskirts of Lannisport. The city had once been a jewel of the Westerlands, its harbor bustling with trade, its walls strong, its buildings crafted from golden sandstone. Now Jaime found it smaller, war-worn. Some districts looked nearly empty. Ships in the harbor were fewer than he remembered, though at least a few were loading cargo. As the caravan approached the gates, the city watched there recognized the royal banner. After a tense moment, they opened the gates. Jaime led his procession into the city's winding streets, the citizens gawking from shuttered windows. In the central square, they were met by a handful of local lords and merchants. Some wore guarded expressions. Others tried to mask their uncertainty with polite smiles. One introduced himself as Lord Markley, the city's appointed castellan in the absence of a higher authority. He bowed stiffly. Your Grace, the city welcomes you. We had not known when you would arrive. Jaime dismounted with care, leg throbbing. The realm is large, Lord Markley. I came as soon as I could. We have much to discuss. Markley led them toward a sprawling, 3-story keep near the harbor, an old fortress that had belonged to the Lannisters before King's Landing overshadowed their seat. Casterly Rock itself was situated a short ride northwest along the coast, towering over the sea. Jaime intended to go there next, but for now, the keep in Lannisport would serve as a base of operations. Tyrion oversaw the establishment of the camp, ensuring the caravan's wagons and horses had suitable stables. Brienne organized guards around the perimeter. That evening, Jaime sat in a chamber that smelled of old parchment and sea salt, with Markley and a group of Westerland nobles. House Brax, House Marbrand, House Crakehall, and others. He recognized some from his youth, others only by their sigils. The atmosphere was tense. Wine was served, but none drank freely. One of the lords, a broad man wearing a gold and purple cloak, stepped forward. Your Grace, we are pleased to see you, but we have concerns. The Westerlands has been without strong leadership since your father's death. Then, Queen Cersei's war left us battered. Now rumors say your cousin Daven challenges you. We need to know. Will you restore the Westerlands to its former power? Will you keep us strong against the rest of Westeros? Or have you given all our power away in these new alliances? Jaime studied the speaker, recalling him as Lord Brax, whose father once served Tywin zealously. The Westerlands remains vital to the realm, Jaime said calmly. But the days of dominating others by fear are over. We must cooperate if we're to rebuild. The houses of the Westerlands will benefit from open trade, from alliances that ensure peace. If we continue old rivalries, we'll only ruin ourselves further. Lord Marbrand, a gray-haired man with a neatly trimmed beard, cleared his throat. We understand the concept of peace, Your Grace, but some among us fear will be overshadowed by Dorne, or the Vale, or the North, since they have more resources now. What do we have left to maintain our position? Tyrion, standing at Jaime's side, spoke up smoothly. House Lannister still controls significant gold mines even if some were run dry under Tywin's expansions. And Casterly Rock is a formidable fortress. A stable monarchy ensures that trade from the Rock and Lannisport flows freely to other regions. We've made sure the Crown invests in the Westerlands roads and ports. If you lend your support to the king, you'll find that trade deals are quite favorable. A strong Westerlands means a stronger realm. Some lords still looked skeptical, but at least they were listening. After further discussion, Jaime promised to personally inspect areas in need of assistance. He also assured them that Daven was in custody in King's Landing, that any bandits claiming his name would be put down. By the meeting's end, a tenuous acceptance emerged. The lords recognized that Jaime was no longer Tywin, nor was he Cersei. But he was still a Lannister and he wore the crown. They would not oppose him openly, at least not yet. The next day, Jaime and a small escort rode out to Casterly Rock. The ancient stronghold rose from a rocky promontory, its massive walls carved partly from the stone itself. It was both a fortress and a mine, with labyrinthine tunnels rumored to hold endless veins of gold. As Jaime's party approached, the sea wind whipped at their cloaks. The rock's silhouette loomed, stirring memories of childhood for Jaime, running through corridors with Cersei, the stern lectures of his father, the sense of House Lannister's unassailable might. Yet the reality was more somber now. The gates were manned by a skeleton garrison. The courtyard showed weeds poking through cracks. An air of neglect clung to the place. Jaime dismounted, feeling that ache in his leg and a deeper ache in his chest. Tyrion, at his side, gazed around with a mix of nostalgia and melancholy. "Home," Tyrion said quietly, voice tinged with irony. "Never thought I'd see it again after father threatened to hang me if I stepped foot here." Jaime's memory flicked back to Tywin's cold face the day Tyrion was disowned. Tywin was gone, though, and so much had changed. "We're here now," Jaime said. "Let's see what remains." They found the steward of the rock, a harried man named Randall Hill, who had served Cersei for a short time before the war ended. He led them through corridors where dust blanketed the floors and storerooms sat half empty. "The mines produce less gold than before," Hill explained, "but we still get enough to sustain a portion of our expenses. Without direct oversight, though, it's been difficult. Some shipments vanish or never arrive in Lannisport." Jaime's jaw tightened. "That will end. We'll restore proper management. Have you had trouble with brigands near the mines?" Hill nodded gravely. "Yes, and some shady sells words who attempt to extort a cut of the gold. The garrison is too small to stop them all. We requested men from Lannisport, but they were short-handed as well." Jaime glanced at Brienne, who was examining the disrepair. She nodded subtly, as if to say, "We can secure this place again." He turned back to Hill. "We'll bolster your garrison. And I'll arrange for a new overseer to ensure the gold shipments are protected. The rock must become a symbol of stability again, not a place bandits can bleed dry." Hill bowed low, relief evident in his face. "Thank you, Your Grace. We've prayed for a strong hand." Jaime spent hours touring the fortress, from the highest battlements to the deeper levels. Everywhere he saw signs of desertion and apathy. The Lannister name still commanded a sort of hollow reverence, but without leadership or direction the place had languished. At one point, Jaime paused in a gallery overlooking a sea-washed cliff. Tywin's personal solar had once been there. He remembered standing by that window, hearing his father's stern words, "A lion does not concern himself with the opinions of the sheep. We take what is ours." But Jaime wasn't that man. Nor did he want to be. He wanted to unite, not subjugate. He lingered by the window, hearing the crash of waves below, letting the memory of Tywin's overbearing presence wash away with the sea breeze. Tyrion appeared by his side, silent for a time. "Father would have hated all this," Tyrion finally said, looking out at the horizon. His precious fortress, half abandoned. The realm in tatters. 2 of his children gone, 1 dethroned and dead. And we stand here picking up the pieces. Jaime nodded. He'd blame us for failing the house, no doubt. But perhaps that's what it takes, tearing down the old illusions and forging something less cruel. He turned, looking at Tyrion. "I intend to make this place function again. The gold that remains should support the realm's reconstruction, not just line one family's coffers." Tyrion grinned faintly. "That's quite progressive of you, brother. Let's do it." They descended to the courtyard, where Brienne and the knights awaited. Jaime addressed them. "We'll leave a detachment here to help secure the mines and rout out any brigands. Hill will coordinate. Tyrion, send word to Cedra in King's Landing, let her know the gold will start flowing again as long as we can safeguard it. We'll ride back to Lannisport soon and see about forging a new charter with the local lords to ensure peace." Before they departed, Jaime allowed himself one last look at Casterly Rock from the outer gates. The cresting waves and jagged cliffs gave the fortress its timeless majesty, but the emptiness that lingered in its halls reminded him that even the mightiest legacy could fail if left untended. House Lannister, stripped of illusions, now had a chance to serve more than just itself. Back in Lannisport, the mood had begun to shift as word spread that King Jaime planned to revitalize the rock's mines and rebuild the region. Merchants perked up at the prospect of new commerce. Local lords, seeing Jaime's commitment, grew less wary. Tyrion orchestrated gatherings with key families, talking them into investing in roads, ports, and trade caravans. Gradually, a tenuous synergy took shape. Still, not everyone was pleased. Whispers abounded of old loyalists to Cersei or Daven who resented Jaime's concessions to the realm. On more than one occasion, suspicious faces in the crowd spat epithets like Oathbreaker or Kingslayer under their breath. Jaime did not react with violence, though it stung. He needed to show that a new era had arrived. A fortnight passed swiftly, filled with negotiations, conferring with miners, and subduing local troublemakers. On the final night of that second week, the local lords hosted a small feast in Jaime's honor, hoping to celebrate the new arrangements. Tyrion was in high spirits, having managed to secure favorable terms that would channel some of the Rock's gold toward rebuilding the region's infrastructure while still supporting the crown. Brienne reported that the roads were safer with more patrols. Overall, it was a modest success. The feast took place in Lannisport's old Citadel Hall, a sturdy structure with open arches overlooking the sea. Lanterns swayed in the ocean breeze, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Tables groaned under platters of roast boar, fish, bread, and fresh fruit from the inland farms. The lords and ladies drank wine from Lannisport's own vineyards, lighter than Dornish reds, but flavorful enough. Minstrels played lute and harp, their tunes lost beneath the steady murmuring of conversation. Jaime sat at the high table with Tyrion at his right, Brienne standing a discreet distance behind. Lord Brax and Lord Marbrand flanked him on the left, discussing some matter of shipping tariffs. Every so often, Jaime nodded, but his attention drifted across the hall. He observed the faces, the subtle body language. Some truly seemed ready to embrace his rule. Others remained watchful, on guard for weakness. As the night wore on, a hush fell, and Lord Markley rose to toast the king. He hailed Jaime as the rightful heir of Tywin Lannister, praising him for bringing peace and hope to the Westerlands. The hall erupted in polite applause. Jaime nodded curtly, raising his own cup. He spoke, voice carrying above the wind and the crackling torches. "Thank you, my lords, ladies, and good folk of Lannisport. I stand before you not just as your king but as one of your own. I was born a Lannister, raised in these halls, taught by the mighty Tywin. I cannot be him, nor do I wish to. But I will serve you, and I will see our homeland restored to dignity without the cruelty or arrogance that once made enemies everywhere we turned. Let us move forward together." A stronger applause followed this time, tinged with genuine warmth. Jaime sat back down, exchanging a glance with Tyrion, who gave him a subtle nod of approval. For a fleeting moment, Jaime felt that perhaps the Westerlands, at least, might rally around him. But as the feast progressed, he noticed a figure near the back of the hall. A tall man in partial armor, face shadowed by the torchlight. Something about his posture rang warning bells in Jaime's mind. As he was about to look away, the man locked eyes with him, then turned and slipped out a side door. Jaime's instincts prickled. He set his cup down. Leaning toward Brienne, he murmured, "Did you see that man near the rear pillar?" She nodded once. "I did. He carried no lord's sigil. I'll have men check on him." Jaime waved her on. She moved smoothly through the crowd, a pale cloak among darker garments. Tyrion frowned, noticing. "Trouble?" "Not sure," Jaime said. "Just a hunch." 15 minutes later, Brienne returned, a grim set to her jaw. "He was gone by the time I reached that corridor," she said quietly. "But one of our knights spotted him near the stables, riding off in haste. No one recognized him. Possibly just a suspicious traveler." Jaime scowled. "Or a messenger for those who would see me dead. We should be on guard." The night ended without further incident, but Jaime's unease lingered. Even as the Westerlands began to accept him, old hatreds or fresh conspiracies might fester. The next morning, he and Tyrion convened a final council with the local lords, securing commitments to send a delegation to King's Landing for a more formal signing of pacts. Then they made ready to depart. The caravan left Lannisport, accompanied by a moderate escort from the city watch for extra security. Jaime cast a final look at the harbor, wondering if he would return soon. He had a realm to oversee, after all, not just the Westerlands. Their route back to King's Landing was set along the Gold Road, with plans to make decent time. The roads were drier in late summer, so they expected fewer delays. On the second day of travel east, they passed the same crossroads in where they'd stopped before. This time, Jaime decided not to linger. He wanted to cover ground swiftly. But by late afternoon, clouds gathered and a sudden downpour pelted the caravan, turning the road to mud. Progress slowed to a crawl, wagons slipping in ruts. The air grew damp and chill. When a wheel cracked on one of the supply carts, Jaime signaled a halt to make repairs and told the men to set up a quick camp off the roadside in a clearing with a few stunted trees. A cold rain battered the tents as they hastily erected them. Jaime sheltered in the largest pavilion, where Tyrion, Brienne, and a handful of knights gathered around a small brazier for warmth. Lightning flickered in the distance, thunder rumbling like an omen. Jaime ran a hand through damp hair, cursing the weather. "We'll lose half a day at least." "It could be worse," Tyrion muttered. "We could be out on an open plain. At least there are some trees to break the wind." He poured himself a little wine from a skin, passing it around. "A night of discomfort, then we move on." Brienne folded her arms. "I'll do a circuit of the perimeter once the men finish setting camp." just in case any opportunistic bandits want to take advantage of the storm. Jaime nodded, appreciating her thoroughness. Good. I'll stay here and brood about the realm. Tyrion gave a dry chuckle. I'll brood with you, brother. Brienne departed into the rain, and Tyrion turned to Jaime more seriously. So, do you think the Westerlands will truly fall in line? Or should we expect more trouble from Daemon's faction? Jaime sighed. We've done what we can. The majority seem willing to at least give me a chance, especially once the gold starts flowing again. But if Daemon or his loyalists keep sowing chaos, we'll need to remain vigilant. Tyrion nodded. We can do that. We've dealt with worse. He was interrupted by a sudden commotion outside. A horse neighed, men shouted. Jaime reached for his cane, rising with a jolt of alarm. Tyrion set down the wineskin. What now? A knight rushed in, rainwater dripping off his helm. Your Grace, there's a messenger. He came riding fast into camp. Claims the city is under attack. Jaime's heart lurched. King's Landing? By whom? The knight panted, wiping rain from his face. He didn't say much. He's outside, half dead with exhaustion. We brought him into a tent. He was shouting about Greyjoy ships at Blackwater Bay. Greyjoy ships? Tyrion exclaimed, eyes widening. Euron. Jaime's mind raced. We had word that Euron might raid, but an outright assault on King's Landing? The city's walls are still partially under repair, and our navy is pitifully small. He clutched the cane. We must get back as soon as possible. Summon Brienne. Break camp now. The knight nodded and rushed away. Tyrion gathered up the map case. Perhaps it's just a raid on the outskirts. But if Euron is bold enough to strike directly at the capital, Jaime's eyes narrowed. Then the realm could slip into chaos again. All we've worked for. Quickly, let's speak to that messenger ourselves. They stepped outside into the downpour, rain drenching them instantly. Lightning flashed overhead, revealing tents lit from within by lanterns. They found the messenger in a smaller tent where a guard hovered. The man lay on a cot, shaking with cold. He was young, face scratched by branches, eyes wild with fear. Jaime knelt beside him, ignoring the mud soaking his cloak. Speak, Jaime commanded, voice firm but not unkind. Tell me what you saw. The young man coughed, sputtering. I came from the Rosby Road, near the city. Saw black sails with the Kraken sigil on the horizon, a whole fleet. They landed men near the Blackwater Rush. The city watch was scrambling to form a defense. Word was Euron Greyjoy himself was there with a monstrous ship, the Silence. The port district was in panic. They said the enemy was firing upon any ships that tried to leave. The gates were shut. Half the city still rebuilding. His voice broke, a haunted look in his eyes. I fled with others to warn the king. Jaime traded a grim look with Tyrion. Euron, it seemed, was launching a direct strike, perhaps aiming to take advantage of King's Landing's vulnerability while Jaime was away. Rest, Jaime told the messenger. We'll handle this. Back in the main pavilion, Jaime found Brienne waiting with a worried expression. He relayed the news quickly. She nodded, jaw set. We ride at first light? Jaime's voice was firm. Yes. The roads are too treacherous in this storm to move swiftly at night. We'll break camp at dawn, push as hard as we can. Let the men sleep in short shifts, keep watch. We have to get back before the city falls. Tyrion grimaced. If Euron's landed a sizable force, we'll need an army to oust him. We don't have nearly enough men in the caravan. The city watch is undermanned and the new King's Guard might hold the Red Keep for a time, but we could be walking into a siege. Jaime's heart pounded. Then we'll gather men along the way. Any loyal lords, especially in the Crownlands, must rally. We can't allow the capital to be taken. He sank onto a crate, gripping his cane. The realm was perched on the edge of a knife once more. Euron's ambition, it seemed, would not be satisfied with mere raids. If he took King's Landing, or even just set it aflame, all the fragile stability Jaime had built could unravel in days. As thunder rumbled overhead, Jaime looked at Tyrion and Brienne. We've come too far to let that bastard tear down our efforts. We will not let King's Landing fall. I swear it. He had no illusions about the difficulty of what lay ahead. The seat of his kingship was under threat, and Euron Greyjoy was a cunning, ruthless foe, hungry for power. But Jaime had faced an undead army, had slain a tyrant king, had survived the downfall of House Lannister's once immense power. He would not yield now. Outside, the rain hammered the tents, and the wind hissed through the trees like an omen. Yet Jaime's resolve burned bright. At dawn, they would ride, injured leg and all, back to the city he had vowed to protect. No storm or tide of Ironborn would stop him. He had promised the realm hope, and he would defend that hope to his last breath.